klien mendapat celik akalnya dalam membolehkan klien untuk membuat tindakan kepada isu-isu ataupun masalah yang dihadapi oleh klien itu sendiri. Tetapi apabila definisi itu digunakan dengan sedemikian, maka definisi itu agak terhad kepada bidang-bidang perkembangan yang kita lihat. Sebab itulah bila kita bercakap tentang the major driving force, I'm going to share with you 5 major forces that shape the future of counseling. 5 unsur utama yang menjadi faktor kepada pembentukan masa depan counseling di dalam dunia perkhidmatan ini. Dan semua major forces ini akan ada kaitannya dengan perkhidmatan awam ataupun pembangunan sumber manusia di dalam proses kita membantu entiti-entiti tertentu untuk mendapatkan sumber ataupun human capital yang terbaik. Yang pertama, saya akan berbicara sedikit tentang evolution of definition. Bagaimana definisi ini yang berevolusi, yang berubah-ubah, bukan kerana tidak ada principle. The principle is always there. The principle is helping and also to develop person. Tetapi the content of the definition will define the scope of services provided by these professional helpers. Perkara yang kedua yang akan saya sentuh ialah professionalism. Bagaimana professionalism itu menjadi penentu kepada keberkesanan ataupun keperluan kepada perkhidmatan kaunseling. Yang ketiga ialah service orientation. Apakah orientasi perkhidmatan yang disediakan untuk masa hadapan? Dari sekarang dan kita bergerak ke masa hadapan. Dan tentunya yang keempat ialah polisi untuk perkhidmatan kaunseling itu sendiri. Apakah polisi-polisi yang ada dan bagaimanakah polisi itu menjadi penentu kepada perkembangan perkhidmatan kaunseling masa hadapan dan apakah benefitnya atau pemanfaatnya daripada mereka yang menerima perkhidmatan ini. Dan seterusnya tentulah yang tak asing lagi yang sering kita bincangkan dalam banyak platform perbincangan, intellectual discourse and also discussion, round table discussion is the technological enhancement ataupun advancement ataupun kemajuan teknologi itu sendiri. So untuk itu mari kita tengok sedikit the review of a definition of counseling yang terkini yang telah pun selalunya dibawa oleh beberapa sarjana. Di Malaysia juga kita menghimpunkan beberapa orang sarjana dalam bidang dan juga dalam bidang yang berkaitan untuk melihat apakah definisi yang ada ini sudah cukup untuk membantu ataupun menyediakan satu perkhidmatan yang profesional. Dalam konteks definition of counseling ini, revisiting of definition was made by a number of scholars throughout the world and especially yang menjadi tonggangan ataupun kita rujukan kita di Malaysia ialah ACA, American Counseling Association, dan juga beberapa association yang berada di negara-negara maju yang lain sebagai kita mencontohi apa yang baik. Namun demikian kita membuat definisi mengikut acuan. Jadi kalau kita lihat dari aspek definition of counseling sendiri, kalau saya boleh kongsikan di sini dan bagaimana ia merupakan penentu kepada perubahan perkhidmatan kaunseling di masa hadapan. Kalau dulu kita lihat kaunseling sebagai satu perkhidmatan bersemuka untuk membantu seseorang itu mendapat celik akal menggunakan ataupun menggunakan prinsip-prinsip psikologi, maka hari ini kita lihat definition ini perlu diberikan dalam konteks yang lebih luas, iaitu counseling merupakan satu aplikasi mental health, aplikasi kesihatan mental, psychological dan juga perkembangan manusia or family system principle berasaskan prinsip-prinsip family system and intervention untuk membantu klien mengubah suai pemikirannya, to adjust their thought, mengubah suai pemikirannya, mengubah suai perasaan ataupun action in order, mengubah suai tindakan-tindakannya bagi membolehkan beliau ataupun klien itu menangani isu-isu perkembangan kendiri, personal growth, isu-isu kesejahteraan, wellness, isu-isu career development ataupun perkembangan kerjaya dan isu-isu patologi ataupun isu-isu yang boleh menyebabkan seseorang itu berada dalam keadaan yang tidak baik ataupun kalau kita kata towards illness. So this all pathological issues ini merupakan satu kemungkinan sekiranya tidak ditangani, if there is no intervention, dia akan berada pada tahap illness dan sebagainya. So with this definition, tentunya lah perkhidmatan kaunseling itu akan menjadi lebih kepada bukan saja untuk melihat tentang perasaan sahaja, tetapi juga tentang pemikiran. Dan selain pada itu tentang tingkah laku ataupun tindakan-tindakan untuk diambil oleh seseorang itu. So kalau kita lihat dalam konteks skop perkhidmatan kaunseling sendiri, maka seseorang kaunselor itu sebenarnya bertugas untuk membantu personal growth. Jadi kalau kita bercakap tentang soal perkembangan sumber manusia, pembangunan sumber manusia, memang ini merupakan sangat melengkapi. It is a very reciprocal proses di mana setiap human capital yang ada dalam institusi pekerjaan ataupun di bawah selian kita mahukan seorang yang berdaya maju. Orang yang berdaya maju ialah orang yang mempunyai personal growth yang baik, iaitu normal and above normal, bukan personal growth yang terbantut. Yang keduanya, kita inginkan sumber manusia kita merupakan orang yang mempunyai kesejahteraannya, iaitu wellness itu sendiri. Dan selain daripada itu, kita juga memang menggalakkan setiap pekerja yang ada di bawah selian kita untuk melihat career development masing-masing. Sebab itulah kita lihat dalam konteks peluang untuk mendapat pendidikan bagi tujuan perkembangan kejayaan diberikan kepada semua orang. Semua orang berhak untuk memohon untuk mendapatkan. Mana yang mampu ditaja oleh kerajaan, ditaja. Mana tidak mampu, boleh uruskan sendiri. Tetapi dengan kelayakan yang ada, dia boleh mendapatkan pekerjaan-pekerjaan lebih baik mengikut potensi. So this is where we want to make sure that every single one dalam struktur perkhidmatan ataupun mana-mana perkhidmatan mempunyai peluang untuk berkembang. Dan selain pada itu, patologi, of course, kita melihat tentang kebajikan human capital kita dari segi apakah kesihatannya dapat dijaga dengan baik. So, sebab itulah definition of counselling ini merupakan satu perkara penting dalam evolution of counselling development, dan inilah akan menentukan. If you stick to the old definition, maka definition itu akan berhenti di situ. Saya mengambil contoh yang paling ketara. Apabila kita berhadapan dengan COVID-19, pandemik COVID-19, kita tidak boleh mengadakan hubungan bersemuka. You have to work from home, dan kalau bekerja pun you have to work from home. Jadi bila work from home, makanya there is no contact, personal contact. Dalam konteks counselling ialah satu sesi pertemuan bersemuka untuk membolehkan, membantu klien mendapatkan kecelakaan. Itu ialah definisi lama. Apabila definisi lama ini digunakan, maka bila kita lihat aspek-aspek counselling itu tak boleh dijalankan melalui online. Jadi this is a great, a big debate dengan sorry to say, dalam lembaga Kaunseling Malaysia yang dalam aktanya tertulis inilah cara ini, tak boleh yang lain. Jadi kesalahan pula. Ada isu-isu etika. Now, if we don't explore the possibilities, if we don't explore the technological advancement yang kita ada, maka definisi inilah akan menyekat perkembangan. That is why the definition of counselling is one of the driving forces to shape the future of counselling. Next slide, please. If we look at the professional status, professionalism, that is the second item I would like to share with you. Just now, saya bercakap tentang definisi counselling itu sendiri. Jadi, of course, kepada penyedia perkhidmatan counselling, we are going to endorse, Perkhidmatan International is going to endorse and propose the new definition by, bukan tiba-tiba propose, by a consensus of all scholars, all notable figures untuk duduk bersama, untuk melihat kembali definisi ini, dan kita menggunakan Delphi teknik, bagi membolehkan kita mendapatkan definisi yang terbaik dalam konteks negara kita. Dan dalam teknik ini selalunya kita menggunakan 2-3 pusingan perbincangan. Nampaknya macam brainstorming, tetapi is more than that, in-depth discussion, and kita nak tentukan apakah definisi yang terbaik yang boleh mengangkat ataupun memberi peluang kepada kaunselor, serta yang lebih penting kebajikan kepada klien. Dan klien kita bukannya klien yang bermasalah, klien yang berkembang maju, klien yang akan mendapat potensi baru. Semua penjawat-penjawat awam yang ada dalam SUK, kalau mengikut servis yang disediakan oleh bahagian psikologi, itu ialah tanggungjawab bahagian psikologi, unit psikologi dan kaunseling di Pejabat Suruh Kerajaan Negeri Sarawak untuk memastikan every individual under the state government are getting this professional service for the sake of, seperti yang saya katakan dalam definisi yang awal tadi, iaitu setiap personal growth, career development, wellness, and so on. So that is why counseling is not about having problem. Counseling is not about mental health issues. Counseling is not about you are stuck somewhere. Counseling is more than that. So with this definition, then we will look into a better scope of services. Yang kedua ialah professionalism. Professional counselors create purposeful relationship. Kaunselor-kaunselor yang profesional, mereka menyediakan satu hubungan yang bertujuan, designed to assist and empower individual. Tujuannya lah untuk memberi pengupayaan pada individu, keluarga dan kumpulan bagi menangani isu-isu atau pencabaran hidup. So this is the professional counselors punya kerja. So if with that is the status, meaning that the future of counseling, the future of counseling services is merely depends on the level of professionalism. That is why, again, Perkhidmatan International as a body of driving body in making sure the professional development of the counselors are there to provide the service professionally, kita sentiasa membuat advokasi terhadap kompetensi of the counselors. Sebab itulah kita mengadakan pelbagai seminar, pelbagai kursus, pelbagai bengkel untuk meningkatkan kemahiran. Dan dengan spirit ini, begitu jugalah yang dilakukan oleh bahagian psikologi counseling di Negeri Sarawak yang diketuai oleh Cik Riziandi sendiri bersama rakan-rakannya. Mereka ini menyediakan perkhidmatan-perkhidmatan di samping melatih kaunselor-kaunselor profesional. Kita juga bangunkan juga community of practice untuk menjadi penyokong yang komplement dan juga memberi sokongan awal kepada kemudahan perkhidmatan kaunseling itu sendiri. Sebab nanti saya akan menyebut tentang perkara yang keempat yang menjadi driving force of the counseling services. So next slide, kita juga bercakap soal apa namanya professional status dari segi professional counselor. Siapa professional counselor? Professional counselor ialah mereka yang terlatih, yang mendapat ijazah dalam latihannya dan dilatih secara profesional untuk bekerja dengan individu, kumpulan ataupun family dalam pelbagai setting. So kalau professional counselors assist clients, dia merupakan satu pendekatan di mana klien ini tidak ada klien-klien tertentu. Dia of all ages, daripada kanak-kanak sehinggalah kepada yang dewasa ataupun akhir dewasa. All ages, tetapi with normal development. Normal developmental, career and relational concern, as well as those who suffer from serious mental health problems, using evidence-based and practices to provide ethical, multiculturally sensitive care. Now, what does it mean? Sebab inilah bezanya nanti dengan psychiatrist. Our next paper selepas ni ialah the psychiatrist. Tetapi we, the counselors, we are working with a person of all ages with normal developmental, career and relational concerns, as well as those who suffer from serious mental health problems. Serious mental health problem meaning before you have mental illness. Mental health is not illness. mental health is something that is affecting your life, but it is just not that to the extent that you need to have medical intervention, because there are chances for you to deal with your problem once you are getting assistance from the professional. That is why mental health issues ini merupakan satu perkara yang sangat penting yang kita lakukan, dan hari ini kita bercakap tentang isu-isu kesihatan mental sebelum ianya menjadikan isu kesihatan mental menjadi parah, ya. Apabila parah, yang memerlukan medication, yang memerlukan further attention, then this is why our partners in professional helping, the medical doctors who are trained in psychiatry, they will take over. Ya. Jadi that is why saya selalu menyatakan bahawa we cannot be working in silos as the professional helpers. Semua counselors yang berada di dalam servis mereka mesti mempunyai hubungan yang akrab dengan rakan-rakan medical doctors who are psychiatrists. Yeah. And with this, then kita boleh saling menghubungi. Then after the psychiatrist have provided some kind of treatment, and then kita boleh sambung balik semula dengan sesi counseling dan sebagainya. So this is a new process yang kita perlu endorse and perlu work together. Kepada pendengar, kalau ada rakan-rakan kita daripada kalangan psikiatris di dalam sidang ini, saya mengajak untuk kita bersama-sama, ya, melakukan kerja-kerja perkhidmatan menolong ini secara profesional dan secara pembidangan, ya. And also supaya kita dapat membantu dan supaya klien kita benefit the best from the services that we have. So again, professional status is about professional counselor graduated from degree professional train. But in our context, ini berbeza sedikit dengan negara-negara lain. Di Malaysia, perkhidmatan counseling ini dikawal oleh sebuah akta yang dikatakan Akta 580 ataupun Akta Counseling 1998. Akta ini sebenarnya diwujudkan untuk melindungi klien yang mendapatkan perkhidmatan. Sebab kita tak mau klien mendapat perkhidmatan daripada mereka yang tidak berkelayakan tetapi dikenakan bayaran dan sebagainya. Kita ada banyak cases, ya, yang juga berlaku di negara kita ini. Dan untuk itu akta ini diperkenalkan, dan akta ini juga mewajibkan bahawa siapa juga yang ingin menjalankan perkhidmatan kaunseling di negara ini mestilah berdaftar dengan Lembaga Kaunseling Malaysia. Jadi untuk membolehkan seseorang itu mendaftar, maka dia akan memerlukan kelayakan minimum standard, minimum qualification, tetapi memenuhi keperluan untuk seseorang itu mengamalkan perkhidmatan kaunseling. So from there on, maknanya setiap kaunselor yang ada di negara kita ini ialah kaunselor berdaftar. As of today, we have more than 9,000 counselors who are registered, and our counselors are everywhere in various settings. Most of them are in the school setting, sebab di sekolah itu dia mempunyai bilangan kaunselor yang agak ramai, ya, kerana menggunakan nisbah, iaitu satu kaunselor nisbah 500 pelajar. Maknanya kalau ada 1,000 pelajar, that particular school ada 2 kaunselor. So in Sarawak itself, we have so many counselors because depending on the numbers of schools. So I hope these counselors are here today to join us to discuss. Yeah? And in fact, the state government of Sarawak yang sangat bermurah hati untuk membiayai penyertaan counselors dalam persidangan-persidangannya. Saya masih ingat lagi persidangan ini juga yang diusahakan oleh Mr. Reziandi ini. Kita merancang untuk mengadakan International Counseling Conference di Sarawak pada 2019, and we cannot do it. So we move on. We plan to 2020. Still we cannot do it. Then we plan to 21. No, we cannot do it because of the third wave of the pandemic. And then we plan, inshallah, 2022 next year, sometime in August. Yeah? But the state government, Ketua Menteri telah pun bersetuju masa kita nak menganjurkan untuk taja kaunselor-kaunselor negeri Sarawak menyertai program-program pembangunan profesional ini. So there you are. We have people who are very concerned tentang the development of the counselor. As a school counselor, I think you should be looking your role in a bigger model. bukan saja setakat di sekolah, tetapi juga di luar setting sekolah. Next slide. We want to look at the professional status again before I move on to the next process. The professional counseling is a humanistic and ethical practice that occurs in the context of relationship that promote human development. So, pendengar sekalian, and also a reminder to all the counselors, professional counselors are professional who provide counseling services yang bersifat kemanusiaan dan mengamalkan secara beretika. Sebab itulah saya selalu meletakkan tagline counseling service, iaitu professional, ethical, and genuine. Maknanya kita melaksanakan program perkhidmatan counseling secara profesional, oleh profesional, dilakukan penuh dengan etika, berpaksikan kepada garis panduan dan juga nilai-nilai etika, dan selain daripada itu kita melakukan kerja ini dalam konteks mempromot ataupun menjana perkembangan individu. Nothing more than that. What is the purpose of counseling a professional? We are promoting the development, the human development in various aspects, be it in your personal growth, be it in your wellness, be it in your career development, be it in your isu-isu yang mencabari anda dari segi patologi. So that is why this status is important and the definition is important. Professionalism is important in order to ensure the direction of the future of counseling. And I should move on to the next one. We are talking about the policy in counseling services. Although bila kita bercakap tentang polisi, negara baru saja mencadangkan, pemimpin mencadangkan supaya adakan sebuah dasar kaunseling negara untuk menjadi garis panduan dan rujukan kepada perkhidmatan ini dan kepada negara kita sendiri. So to have this policy, maka kita perlulah mengadakan beberapa proses yang selalunya digunakan melalui perbincangan dari pelbagai pihak, daripada akar umbi, daripada level of society, daripada stakeholders, daripada profesional, daripada gabungan bidang-bidang perkembangan manusia, dan daripada of course the scholars and counseling itu sendiri. But proses ini merupakan satu proses yang panjang dan perlu dilakukan secara serius, dan dia bermula dengan beberapa metod ataupun teknik. Mungkin ada yang mengadakan proses town hall, kemudian daripada town hall kepada round table discussion, kemudian kepada focus group discussion, lepas kepada some kind of convention, and kupasan kepada data, kupasan kepada analisis kepada data-data yang ada daripada dapatan-dapatan town hall, and then conduct some kind of net analysis, research and so on. So towards that, then barulah kita boleh rumuskan a strong policy. Whatever it is, when you talk about counseling, we are also talking about what we call as perkhidmatan menolong yang bersifat menjurus kepada kesihatan mental. Alhamdulillah di negara kita ada dasar kesihatan mental yang telah pun diperkenalkan kepada negara kita, dan ia boleh dijadikan rujukan. Tetapi dari segi policy counseling, saya dalam ucapan awal Konvensyen Kaunseling Kebangsaan yang baru-baru ini, saya ada menyatakan tentang beberapa trust yang perlu ada, dan saya kongsikan 4 saja di sini yang sebenarnya ada di dalam dasar kesihatan mental juga, ada kesamaannya. Yang pertama ialah accessibility. Perkhidmatan counseling, kalau kita nak tentukan the future of counseling services, there must be an element of accessibility, kecapaian. Siapa yang dapat akses, bukan saja orang-orang yang berada di bandar-bandar, misalnya di Kuching, Sarawak, di bandar-bandar besar, tetapi bagaimana mereka yang berada di luar bandar, Bagaimana mereka yang jauh di pinggiran? What kind of counseling services do they get? Or sometimes we say they don't even need counseling. No, if you are looking from the definition of counseling, they need counseling services. They need their personal growth. They need their career growth. They need their career development guide. So ini merupakan satu lagi yang kita katakan pendemokrasian perkhidmatan counseling. Kalau dulu kita berbicara tentang democratization of education in the school setting, tetapi dalam setting Negeri Sarawak, so saya salute Setiausaha Kerajaan Negeri Sarawak dan juga timnya, especially dalam tim pembangunan sumber manusia yang bekerja bertungkus lumus. Selain daripada limpahannya kepada pejabat awam, mereka juga sedang menyediakan perkhidmatan melalui community of practice untuk masyarakat Negeri Sarawak seluruh. This is what we should be doing. This is what we call as a proactive government. Kerajaan yang proaktif akan melihat perkhidmatan-perkhidmatan yang bersifat kesihatan mental, perkembangan ini dalam semua konteks dan capaiannya dapat dinikmati oleh setiap individu. Ini kita bercakap tentang sovereignty. Yang keduanya comprehensiveness. Apabila kita cakap tentang comprehensiveness, maknanya adakah perkhidmatan itu yang disediakan itu menyeluruh dan menepati keperluan. Yang ini tak melibatkan siapa yang melaksanakan, bagaimana center itu disediakan, adakah conduciveness-nya diambil kira, and also is it working with a system, and adakah dia boleh dijadikan satu sumber untuk menjadi rujukan, ataupun apakah kesinambungannya daripada komprehensifnya ataupun kekemasan perkhidmatan ataupun the structure of the services. And then kita bercakap tentang continuity and integration. Bagaimanakah perkhidmatan ini nanti apabila berlakunya penamatan, dia disambung ke mana dan apakah pihak-pihak yang boleh membantu kepada keperluan perkembangan klien itu sendiri. Jadi ini merupakan perkara yang penting dalam polisi dan tentunya kolaborasi daripada pelbagai sektor amat penting, kerana kalau kita bercakap tentang kemajuan kerjaya dan ke mana dia nak pergi, ataupun kita bercakap tentang kemudahan untuk personal growth, apakah yang boleh lakukan untuk individu itu meneruskan, sebab the counselor is not going to do A to Z about all the development. Yang itu kita hanya counselor akan membantu dari segi mendapatkan celik akal. The insight is still there, mendapatkan celik akal, membantu klien untuk membuat keputusan bagi diri dia sendiri. So this is how it works. And moderator, how much time do I have? Jam saya ni macam tak betul pula.
Masih ada lagi dalam 15 minit.
Okay, alright. Nanti kita nak allow sampai Q&A kalau ada ya. Alright. The next driving force yang merupakan penting, we are talking about service orientation. Bila kita service orientation, evident, dulu kita bercakap tentang perkhidmatan yang kita berikan bagi membantu seseorang yang menghadapi masalah untuk mengenangi masalahnya. Tapi hari ini kita bercakap tentang evidence-based practices. Amalan-amalan yang terbukti memang bagus. Counseling help people via prevention. Jadi service orientation ini bukan sekadar intervention. It's not no intervention. Dulu intervention. Maknanya ada problem, datang berkaunselor dan kaunselor mengadakan sesi dan kita membuat intervention terhadap isu supaya kaunselor klien mendapat solution untuk problem ini. But now when we talk about service orientation, the driving forces that shape the future of counseling is the new orientation of services. Iaitu, ni sering saya katakan, counseling is about prevention. We want to prevent a person from falling into pieces. Jadi sebab itulah kita menyediakan program-program pembangunan kendiri, program-program yang bersifat motivasi, facilitating, and also helping the client to see their potential, perkembangan. So prevention is about helping the person to look at perkembangan. Jadi banyak aktiviti yang boleh lakukan untuk membantu seseorang itu berkembang atau mengelakkan daripada seseorang itu terlibat dengan perkara yang lain. Ini bila kita kata prevention, this is where the counselors have to have a new insight. What is that? Kalau kita kata, what do we prevent? What do we prevent? Kita prevent individual dari tidak berkembang secara normal dari segi pemikirannya. So that the individual are having a clear and a futuristic thought about himself. Ya. Yang keduanya, kita bantu klien untuk melihat potensi diri dia. Ya. Yang ketiga, kita bantu klien untuk melihat perkembangan sosial dia. Yang keempat, kita membantu klien untuk melihat perkembangan diri dia dari segi kesihatan, hygiene, and also what is good for you to do. Sebab itulah program-program mencegah daripada merokok, jangan mengambil dadah, jangan meminum alkohol. These are all preventive program yang boleh diselenggarakan. Now, kalau kita cakap tentang ini, maknanya we have to work with another agency. Contoh, saya memanglah saya kena sebut ni sebab saya bekas ketua pengarah ADK. We have a program ADK yang membuat program pencegahan. So this is where the counsellors work together with these AADK officers to embark on prevention of drug addiction. Yang keduanya kita kata addiction, isu-isu addiction mesti kita tangani. So this is part of the duty of the counsellors to provide psycho-education. You might not be able to do everything, but you can collaborate with another institution to provide this program ataupun the intervention on prevention. Then we are also using evidence-based counseling, help people via education, providing education. Kita sangat popular dengan psycho-education. Psycho-education meaning that providing education that will psychologically enhance the person to move on with their life. Macam sekarang ni kita ada psycho-education on awareness of suicidal issues. So kita melantik melantik beberapa institusi untuk menjalankan program psycho-education bagi membantu mencegah pada tingkah laku mencederakan diri, self-harm. And we have done this quite effectively. We work with the PRS, sekolah. PRS ni merupakan pembimbing rakan sebaya di peringkat sekolah. Kita tahu ada isu-isu suicidal dalam kalangan awal remaja juga, suicidal attempt, suicidal ideation. So we need to have this prevention program melalui education, and also of course later if there is a need on the treatment, and this is where the counsellors are providing treatment. Treatment maknanya bukannya kita menggunakan ubat-ubatan, but menggunakan talk therapy for the treatment. Jadi this is where apa yang kita katakan service orientation tadi sebagai satu perkara yang menggunakan evidence based. Dan dengan service orientation ini, dia akan menjadi satu lagi forces yang menentukan masa depan kita. When we have this, maka kita punya scope of services akan menjadi lebih bermakna dan lebih significant to the society. Sebab, next slide, counseling is about helping people deal with life challenges throughout the lifespan. Dia merupakan satu perkhidmatan menolong yang membantu individu, next slide ya Tanika, untuk melihat perjalanan ataupun to go through their challenges throughout the lifespan, sepanjang hayatnya. Counseling, a profession assisting people to lifelong mental health, educational and career goals. See, this is the service orientation yang pastinya akan tak menantangan lah sebenarnya. Sebab itulah sorry to say, apa yang kita ada ni belum lagi memenuhi nisbah yang seperti yang diinginkan. Dan I'm sure the state government of Sarawak, they will be considering all this, knowing the dynamic of the leaders, the SUK yang saya sangat kenal ialah Dr. Sabariah Putih, yang begitu positif dan begitu yakin tentang keupayaan perkhidmatan psikologi dan kaunseling untuk membantu perkembangan perkhidmatan awam di Sarawak dan juga pembangunan minda masyarakat negeri Sarawak seluruhnya. So that is a service orientation yang kita katakan sebagai satu perkara yang penting. So to sum with that, to strengthen the service orientation as the way forward. So I would like to say that counseling is a professional relationship through which credentialed and regulated counselors, these are all licensed counselors, not licensed to kill, licensed to conduct counseling. Regulated counselor assist and empower individual, membantu dan memperkasakan individu, keluarga dan kelompok serta community to prevent or to address life challenges. Yang itu foster human development and advocate for wellness, human dignity and also social justice. Ini penting, social justice in a healthy society. So this is where the service orientation is being viewed as something that is very, very significant and important to the society. And this is where it will be the driving force of the future. Last but not least, that I would like to share with you is about the technology advancement that we have today. We know that everyone are working from home, meeting from wherever you are, although it's from home. Even now, I am in Kuantan. Talking to you in Sarawak, by right, I should be in Kuala Lumpur. But because I have another event, that is the beauty of the technology. I can be everywhere to still communicate with you. And the concept of global village is really real. We have been talking about global village back 5 years ago, or maybe 10 years ago. Tetapi hari ini konsep global village memang mendekatkan kita dengan adanya jambatan-jambatan teknologi. Communication beyond virtual reality. Dulu communication kita menggunakan di awalnya ialah telefon, ya. Kemudian kita ada telegram. Kemudian kita ada keadaan lain. Kita tak menyangka pun kita boleh menengok rupa orang yang kita bercakap walaupun di Amerika, di mana. Tetapi hari ini communication telah pun walaupun virtual reality, tetapi dia menghampiri absolute reality. So dengan itu maknanya kita boleh saja misalnya dalam kita melepaskan rindu, ini banyak digunakan oleh masyarakat kita di Malaysia dan di dunia. Waktu kita berada dalam PKP, MCO, maka gadgetlah menjadi perkara yang penting. Dan tentulah yang menjadi untungnya mereka yang berniaga telefon lah. Ya. Mereka lah industri telecommunication, merupakan industri yang paling laris dan juga industri pembuatan penghasilan gadget-gadget merupakan industri yang paling laris produknya kerana of the need of the people to use communication technology. And then untuk kita melihat perkhidmatan kaunseling dan juga yang lain-lain yang mana telah pun diyakini oleh beramai pihak, iaitu the efficacy of technology, keupayaan teknologi dalam menyediakan genuine social presence. It's not genuine actually. Kalau kita bercakap dari genuineness, itu ketulinan. Tetapi kehadiran sebenar memang tak dapat. Tetapi dia mampu menyediakan kehadiran sosial yang hampir sebenar. Dapat melihat rupa paras, dapat melihat mimik muka, dapat melihat the body language melalui virtual reality ini. Dan kalau itu yang berlaku, maknanya dalam konteks terminologi tadi yang saya katakan online counselling memang boleh digunakan sebab kita dapat melihat siapa yang kita bercakap. Dulu kita bercakap dengan telecounselling, counselling melalui telefon. Tetapi with this technology, that is why the new definition of counselling has to be reviewed, has to be changed, and has to be able to address the issues that is encountering us in this modern world. And then the evolution and the speed of development, perkembangan kemajuan yang terlalu pantas dan mempunyai evolusi yang sangat tak terkejar kadangnya. So the future of counseling juga banyak bergantung pada technology advancement. We have already now introduction of the apps, penggunaan apps untuk tujuan kesihatan mental. Kemudian bagaimana untuk early intervention of mental health issues yang boleh menggunakan app. So these are all technology advancement using the knowledge of psychology, using the knowledge of counseling. Dan of course akhir sekali ialah computer based counseling services akan menjadi satu trend yang baru. Dah pun berlaku sebenarnya. Hari ini pun dah berlaku. Tetapi in the future kita akan melihat satu lagi teknologi barangkali yang akan diciptakan yang hampir-hampir you boleh bercakap dengan orang. Kalau kita tengok dulu, kita tengok movie, kereta terbang macam fantasi. Banyak perkara-perkara yang fantasi 10 tahun, 20 tahun yang lalu menjadi realiti hari ini. The Star Trek, mereka mencipta hologram untuk berkomunikasi dengan orang lain. Tiba-tiba je Trump ada kat depan orang tu tetapi dalam bentuk hologram. So ini bukan satu bukan satu perkara yang tak mungkin berlaku. It will be something possible to take place in the future. So that is why, again, I think what we are talking today is about the future of the driving forces of counseling services. And untuk melakukan segala ini, saya masih lagi menyatakan bahawa I think I need to go to the last slide. The last slide before I stop. Last not least, let us spread kindness to all. Because apa juga yang kita lakukan hari ini, apa juga perkembangan teknologi, akan ada elemen-elemen individualism. Sebab kalau kita tengok dalam mega trend, the individualism versus pluralism. Jadi individualism ini banyak akan membawa kita kepada elemen-elemen individualistik. Dan terbukti dengan nyatanya depan mata kita lihat keluarga, kalau pergi ke kedai makan, masing-masing akan melihat masing-masing. Even di rumah pun, you are not talking to anybody. You are just talking to the phone, and memang gadget ataupun communication internet ini merupakan satu perkara yang sangat mempunyai magnet yang sangat kuat, menarik minat kita. Sometimes apa yang dilihat tak ada benda yang penting pun. Ada yang tu tengok TikTok lah, tengok news lah. Tetapi di katil nak tidur pun suami tengok pun, isteri tengok pun masing-masing. Lepas tu terlelap tidur. You don't have time to talk with your children. So yang ini saya tak blame siapa-siapa pun. Every one of us are going through this, and we need to keep reminding ourselves. Later on, the counselors in Sarawak will have to also to design this training workshop to help our society dealing with gadget, internet addiction. We have this new addiction now, kita panggil internet addiction. And also this addiction ni, dia punya onsetnya bukan saja berlaku dalam kalangan kanak-kanak. Kita kata dulu orang tua, kanak-kanak, tapi kanak-kanak di awal kanak-kanak dia dah pun ada lekatan. Dia macam tak boleh tak ada. And jalan yang terbaik yang dipikirkan oleh family ialah providing. Kita jadi enabler. The families are the enabling individual yang membolehkan. Sebab kita kata daripada dia meraung-raung dan pagi dia diam-diam. So of course they keep quiet when they get that. Everybody will keep quiet when they get this phone. Nak pula phone yang canggih-canggih lagi. Orang tua pun sama juga. Yang dah pencen macam saya pun sama juga. Leno je bila tanya buat apa tu? Mengaji gini. Buat apa tu? Baca Quran sikit ni. Tetapi sometimes nothing, benda yang nonsense keluar. And nonsense of ni terlalu banyak benda yang bukan-bukan. Silly joke, ada joke yang bagus. Jadi untuk kanak-kanak dia punya sense of curiosity berbeza. They would like something to do with their personal development, dia punya sexual arousal. This is where they start exploring a new area because they know that Mr. Google is there. You can get everything di hujung jari. So okay. Ya, saya tahu dah habis. So akhir sekali, let us spread kindness. Kita berahmah untuk semua. Kita mengorbankan sedikit masa, tegur dan sebagainya, dan kita pastikan kita dapat menjadi individu yang terbaik untuk membantu orang lain. Jadi I'm sorry, masa dah pun habis. Saya mesti berhenti di sini. Terima kasih kepada penganjur.
Terima kasih yang berbahagia Datuk Dr. Abdul Halim bin Husin atas ucapan sebentar tadi. Sebelum kita beralih ke Q&A section, ingin saya simpulkan sedikit perkongsian Datuk pada pagi ini berkenaan tema kita iaitu The Force That Shape Counseling Future. Perkongsian sebentar tadi adalah membicarakan tentang 5 elemen utama yang membentuk masa depan counseling iaitu evaluation of definition, professionalism, service orientation, policy of counseling services and technology enhancement. Kaunseling, sebuah disiplin ilmu yang berpaksikan kepada bidang psikologi muncul sebagai profesion yang sangat berkait rapat dengan perkembangan dan pembangunan kendiri manusia. Kelestarian darjat dan maruah profesion serta kemerandiannya banyak bergantung kepada tahap dan kualiti profesionalisme pengamal sendiri. Pengalaman kaunseling yang berasaskan dan bersandarkan kepada keutuhan etika adalah tenaga yang paling berharga dalam menentukan masa depan kaunseling itu sendiri. Untuk itu, pengamal kaunseling perlu memiliki tahap kecekapan yang tinggi dan seterusnya menguasai ilmu-ilmu baru dalam bidang kaunseling melalui aktiviti penyelidikan berorientasikan tindakan bagi mengutarakan amalan terbaik melalui pembuktian nyata. Kemunculan kemajuan teknologi dan kecanggihan juga merupakan salah satu sumber tenaga cabaran baru yang perlu ditepani secara optimum oleh pengamal kaunseling. Akhir sekali, let us spread kindness to all. Baiklah, sekarang kita akan beralih ke Q&A section. Okey, Datuk?
Ya, silakan.
Okey, kita akan buka kepada soalan pertama iaitu daripada Puan Nur Akilah Othman.
Ya, silakan Puan.
Okey, kaunselor bagi setiap 500 orang pelajar akan ditempatkan di setiap sekolah bagi memastikan kesejahteraan mental. Bagaimana dengan setiap jabatan kerajaan di Malaysia? Adakah dibolehkan bagi pekerja memenuhi bilangan bagi membolehkan mendapatkan seorang kaunselor di jabatan masing-masing?
Okey, bagus soalan tu ya. Ini merupakan satu soalan yang sentiasa menjadi perbincangan sebab dia melibatkan perjawatan. Sebab itulah kita Perkhidmatan Internasional sangat membuat advokasi tak henti-henti. Kita nak counselling community, counselling workplace yang ada di setiap agensi. Malahan di setiap jabatan mesti ada perkhidmatan counselling. Dan untuk menyelaraskan, sebab itulah kerajaan negeri boleh mula memikirkan bagaimana untuk menempatkan kaunselor di semua agensi di bawah kerajaan negeri. Saya mengambil contoh ya, rakan kita di negeri Johor Darul Takzim ya. Mereka pada awalnya dia ada tak ramailah kaunselor macam di Sarawak juga. Tetapi baru-baru ini kerajaan negeri, ini sebagai contoh sajalah ya. Sebab saya baru lagi berurusan dengan State Government Johor. Mereka menghantar 25 orang kaunselor untuk menjalani program Masters of Counselling dan bertauliah mendapatkan kaunselor berdaftar dan hari ini they have 35 counselors. So saya fikir ramainya. Where do you put all this? Kita letak di semua bahagian di daerah dan sebagainya. So this is one example yang boleh dibuat. Tetapi more than that, saya mengajak kaunselor yang ada untuk membolehkan kita mendapatkan bilangan kaunselor bukan kerana kita nak ramai, tidak. Kita buat kerana we want the public, the civil servant mendapat yang terbaik. So kita buktikan bahawa human resource development is about having the right person, also the appropriate individual to help the HR in all sectors for their resources ataupun human resources itu. Jadi maknanya we need more people. But you as a counsellor, you need to convince your management. You need to convey the message that this is important. That is why they kata tindakan, research, action-based research is important to prove that we need this. And also you need to have an impact study on what have you given. Macam yang kita buat ini dan macam yang lain. So with that, I am very sure kita mesti memenangi. You must win over the heart of the pemimpin-pemimpin organisasi untuk meyakinkan. You cannot blame the leaders because they don't know. If you really think that your profession is important, prove me. And of course, I will buy in your ideas. Itulah dia punya kedudukannya. Okay.
Sekarang kita akan balik kepada soalan yang kedua daripada Encik Jeffrey Jalong. Okey, isu stigma terhadap perkhidmatan dan aktiviti kaunseling masih berlaku hingga ke hari ini di semua peringkat, individu, keluarga, kumpulan komuniti dan organisasi. Soalannya, apakah pendekatan yang baik berkesan untuk memastikan individu, masyarakat, organisasi dapat menerima makna hikmat kaunseling dan berminat untuk terlibat dan hadir ke sesi kaunseling?
Okeylah, sebab itu hari ini kita bercakap tentang the driving forces of the future of counselling. Apakah masa depan counselling? Adakah counselling akan berada dalam dunia stigmanya lagi ataupun kita nak keluar daripada stigma ini? So kalau kita nak keluar dari stigma, maka kita kena lihat definisi counselling ni. Counselling bukannya untuk orang bermasalah. Itu yang penting kita kata. Counselling is for personal development. Counselling is for career development. Counselling is for personal growth. Counselling is for mental health. Supaya kita menjadi orang yang sehat. Even mental health issue pun menjadi stigma, ya. Kita pun bila kita dengar tu, kita pun menggunakan perkataan yang tak betul, ya. Tetapi saya tak boleh salahkan masyarakat. Kita aku mental kan budak ni mental lah katnya. So kesian perkataan mental is just about thought, thinking, ya. Jadi kita gunakan itu sebagai satu konotasi yang negatif. So we cannot blame, Cik Jeffrey, we cannot blame the society, we cannot blame the people with stigma because that is what they know. Itulah persepsi yang terbina daripada apa yang kita lakukan. So menjadi tugas penting kepada kaunselor semua untuk membuat temu seru, outreach dan juga membuat psycho-education melalui sidang-sidang seperti ini. Ya. So we need to talk to the top management. We need to talk to the middle management. We need to talk to the people at large. We need to talk to the public. We need to make people understand. And it is a journey. Ia bukannya berlaku dalam sekelip mata begitu, tetapi ia akan berlaku secara berterusan dan kena ada kesungguhan. Dan kena menyampaikan dengan perkara yang betul. So langkah pertama ialah kita mewawarkan apa itu perkhidmatan kaunseling. Inilah antara yang sedang dilakukan oleh bahagian kaunseling di Jabatan Setiausaha Kerajaan Negeri Sarawak untuk merakyatkan perkhidmatan kaunseling. To create awareness among the society that counseling is not for problematic person. Counseling is not, even if you have problems, so what? Yeah. Every one of us have problems. You cannot be having problem and keeping it to yourself. Sebab itu dalam program kesihatan mental, let's talk. Pernah dengar kan? Let's talk. Then it's okay if you are not okay. Tak mengapanya kalau kita tak okay. As long as we get help from someone so that we can be okay. So if we are not okay, don't think that you are the worst person in the world. This is the end of your life. Ramai orang yang tak okay pun. But we need to learn how to be okay. If you cannot do it yourself, then we need to talk to someone who knows how to help you to be okay. So the counselors are the one. Yeah. Okay. All right.
Yes. Terima kasih Dato' atas perkongsian tadi. Okey. Baiklah, untuk makluman semua, berakhirlah sesi Q&A kita untuk sesi ucap tama pertama ini. Sekali lagi, majlis ingin mengucapkan ribuan terima kasih kepada yang berbahagia Dato' Dr. Abdul Halim bin Husin atas perkongsian yang menarik pada pagi ini. Terima kasih, Dato'.
Okey, sama-sama.
Okey. Baiklah, konferensi akan diteruskan dengan sesi ucap tama kedua. Seterusnya, saya akan menyerahkan sesi ucap tama kedua untuk dikendalikan oleh moderator seterusnya iaitu Encik Mujahidin. Dengan ini, dipersilakan.
Terima kasih Puan Felicity. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera dan salam Sarawakku sayang. Saya Muhammad Mujahidin bin Jeffrey selaku moderator ucap tama kedua. Para hadirin yang dihormati, sekarang majlis akan beralih kepada slot ucap tama yang kedua. Dengan ini, majlis dengan sukacitanya ingin menjemput Profesor Dr. Syukran Abdul Rahman dari International Islamic University Malaysia dengan slot ucap tama yang kedua bertajuk The Forces That Shape Counselling's Future. Dipersilakan, Profesor.
Okay, bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahirrahmanirrahim. Wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil anbiya'i wal mursalin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Thank you very much Encik Muhammad Mujahidin. Yang berbahagia Dr. Abdul Halim, I think he is still here. The Secretariat of Webinar Conference for Psychology and Counseling in the Sarawak government participants of this webinar conference, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and a very pleasant morning to all of you. First of all, I would like to thank the organizer for organizing this very important event. Congratulations to the state government of Sarawak for taking the initiative to bring this topic on psychology and counseling to its what we call that deserved position. I believe this will be beneficial to many parties, including the civil service members, who have many issues, not only issues, but potential, which can be polished through the application of counseling and psychology. So, Encik Mujahideen, allow me to share my slides so that I can be assisted by the points that I have written on the slides when I address the audience. Okay, I think everybody can see these slides now. Okay, I have been assigned to talk about the forces that shape psychology's future. If just now you have heard of what are the forces that shape counseling's future, I think this is also related, right? You have heard that counseling and psychology are inseparable. Okay, so my task today is to look at or to share with you my view on what are the factors or what are the forces that shape the field of psychology and also the practice of psychologists. Right, so we have two ideas here: psychology as a field and psychologists as a profession. Okay, so I think all of you are in the profession or in the field of psychology research if you are academics or students, students learning psychology. I have only 3 objectives to cover. I hope it is 40 minutes time. I can share with you these 3 notions. Number 1, highlighting to you the emerging scenarios. What are the emerging factors or forces that shape the future of psychology, as the field of study and also as field of practices. So I have 2 main ideas here: psychology as field of study, field of research. Right? Field of study here refers to research, and also training and development. Another is practices. How do we see psychology as a field of practice? Who are the professionals? Okay, how to become professionals in the field of psychology? Number 2, to outline the role of psychology researchers. Right, so we are not only talking about counselors or counseling psychologists, IO psychologists, organization development specialists, but we are also talking about their roles as researchers sebagai penyelidik. Right? What are the roles of psychology as researchers as well as professionals? And what are their roles in empowering individuals, in empowering the society to relate to the new challenging world? Right? I think at this initial level, I want to put a point that we psychologists, we are not directly changing people, we are not directly developing people or improving people, but we are empowering them. How do we empower them so that they themselves can change? So that they themselves know how to develop themselves, so that they themselves know how to improve their work that they are doing, the future of themselves as well. And the third one is to suggest the type of intervention. Not to suggest the intervention, but to suggest the type of intervention that you can adapt or adopt later on in order to develop this field of psychology in your own setting, in your school, in your organization, or even at home, as well as how to develop the professionals in psychology, how to produce, so how to nurture competent psychologists for Malaysia, for your organization, and for the world over, inshallah. All right. So this is my 3 objectives of having my talk this morning. All right. So let's briefly look at the emerging scenario. Emerging ecosystem that shape the future of psychology as a field of study as well as a field of practice. Right? So I always say these 2 things: okay, field of study and field of practices, and these two are inseparable as well. So we do not want to become a practitioner without having, information, without having adequate information. Now, to have adequate information, to have adequate knowledge, okay, for our practices, we need to be armed by, okay, good research practices. Right. So what are to be researched in? What are to be observed? What are to be explained? Okay, what are to be analyzed? What are to be predicted? Right. So we have many emerging scenarios now, and I think the reason of us being on a virtual conference or webinar now is because of the changing nature of our ecosystem as well. Right. So we are talking about rapidly developing country. We are in a rapidly developing country. We are now moving into new era of development. I think last month, the government has tabled their 12 Malaysia plan, right? So we are in a rapidly developing country. When we talk about developing country, we're not talking only about economic growth. Okay, we have to give proper or due attention to the social growth as well, the psychosocial issues. Psychosocial issues ataupun isu-isu psychosocial, spiritual, okay, must be given due attention as well. Because these are the enabler. These are the enabler to the socio-economic growth. Right? So we want investors to come to our country. We want investors from other countries to come and join force with us in developing our economic development. But, we must make them feel safe here. How to make them feel safe? How to make investors feel safe in our country? By having good values, by having good psychosocial development among the forces, among the workforces as well. All right, so this is one emerging scenario that we have to give attention as psychology researcher as well as practitioner. Number 2, okay, population of approximately 34 million people now. And we are very multi-ethnic. We speak many languages. We are multilingual society, multi-religious. Okay, we have various discipline of knowledge. Okay, Malaysians now have various discipline of knowledge. I mean, last time we maybe have limited domain of knowledge or area of knowledge, but now Malaysians have various level of domains of knowledge. Not only Malaysian, there are also other people who reside in Malaysia and they are not Malaysian, and they contribute to also the development of our socio-economic growth. Right? So these people are people who need to be dealt with, whose presence must be benefited as well. Whose presence here must be somehow managed. Maybe they have their psychosocial issues when they are in Malaysia as well. Right? So these are another area that we are going to cater for or give attention to. All right, we have been encountering and predicting unpredicted scenario or unpredicted condition. Before March 2020, for example, things were of one direction. But come March, when we have the PKP or MCO, things have changed to various directions. Maybe I would say, haywire direction for initial 1 month. Right? So we had unpredicted conditions due to various changes. Natural disaster, ICT changes, lifestyle changes. That create what you call VUCA now. I think you are familiar with VUCA. VUCA current scenario and VUCA future scenario as well. We are living in a scenario which are shaped or characterized by volatile environment. Okay, volatile. I mean, we are not sure of what is going to happen. Okay, everything is uncertain as well. Uncertain. Now everything is becoming more complex and complex, and everything cannot be explained, okay, objectively. We have ambiguous scenario as well. So we are living in this. These are the factors. These are the forces that require people to adjust, that require people to position themselves in the context so that they can live harmoniously, so that they can have good level well-being for themselves as well as for their family members or the society. And like Dr. said just now, not everything that we can deal, okay, we can deal it on our own. We need assistance, right? We need people who can help us. Kita dengar perkataan professional menolong tadi, right? So we need helping professionals, because helping professionals can help us see the way that we can't see without the help. We can be assisted to solve problems or to understand situations, okay, via the help of helping professionals, counselors, right? EAP, employee assistance provider professionals can also help you, right, to deal with this VUCA scenario, right? So we have changes in invention, changes in innovation. We have globalization, we have natural changes. These all will disrupt our life activities, okay, at social level, at work level, at many other levels, political level also, they have been disrupted because of the changes in invention, innovation, natural disasters, so on and so forth. Right? So when these changes happen, we need to adjust our life. We have to maneuver our life. We have to, look for better direction of behavior so that we can have equilibrium, we can have harmonious, we can have balanced life, although the changes takes place. Right? So what happens if we do not do anything with the difficulties which were caused by these changes, right? So maybe we'll have what you call that deteriorated or jeopardized quality of life. Whenever we have jeopardized or deteriorated quality of life, we will infect it to other people. We will create problems to our society. Okay, we initially have life, okay, which are at ease. We don't have problems. But now, because of the changes, okay, we need to adjust. If we do not adjust, then we are living with problem, or we are living in problematic condition in that sense. So we are telling you that, this new development, these changes in invention, innovation, ICT lifestyles, they do not bring everything good. They might also bring some difficulties to our life. And this will affect our well-being, the well-being of our family and our society and our country as well. All right. So now these factors or these forces make it imperative for psychology researchers, psychologists as well, to assist people so that they can have harmonious and sustainable living. We are talking not only about today, we are talking about future. Today we have heard of SDG. We're talking about Sustainable Development Goals. Whatever we are enjoying now, we want our generations to come to enjoy as well. Okay? If not equal, if not better, they are equal. They're having equal well-being. Okay? That we are having now. Right. Okay, the current forces at workplaces, for example, in the workplaces, workforce are facing their tough time. Okay? If you are businessmen, for example, you are struggling with investment. Okay? If you are working parents, okay, you have problems, you have issues, you have difficulty in raising your children because you have to juggle with many roles at home. Okay, you're working from home with your children around. You have to divide your attention to work and also to your child. I mean, to child development or child management, right? And children themselves, they also have challenges. Last time they were, undergoing structured education process, but now the education processes have changed because of changes due to natural disasters. But thanks to the technology, we have this Zoom, Google Meet, Google Classroom and whatnot, which have assisted in their education process. But still, they have to adjust themselves. Parents have to adjust. Teachers have to adjust. Education authority have to also adjust. So these are the forces that require or that push us to adjust. And definitely we need help, we need assistance, because all the changes have deteriorated or jeopardized at least our normal well-being that we used to enjoy before this. Right, so this require psychologists or behavioral scientists to play more impactful roles, to reduce vulnerability, we call it, vulnerability among people, so that they do not easily succumb to any challenging demands. Succumb here means they do not know how to react, they do not know how to respond, just let it be, right? Let it be at their, what we call that, expenses, right? So people have a disruptive livelihood. I mean, they do not know how to make a living anymore because of the changes in what we call that workplace or job design. Our job design, I mean, the way we do job have changed. Now, some people, they do not know how to adjust when they have to work from home. Okay, how do we respond to these new forces? We are living in what we said just now, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous scenario or environment, right? So this would definitely require us to respond, and not everybody are able to respond judiciously, effectively. We need assistance. I think we have been assisted a lot, not necessarily by counselors, not necessarily by psychologists at our workplace. Maybe our boss, our leaders, they have been playing their role to help us managing or adjusting to the new factors or new forces due to the pandemic, for example. Changes happen in various aspects of life and our socio-economic activities. And the changes are characterized by enormous types of issues, enormous or many levels of issues, and this require attention, not only attention, but also our solution. Who can help address the issues? Who can help us explain the issues? Who can help us adjusting with the new demands due to the changes? One of them is psychologists, right? So what can psychology offer? Psychology can offer research, right? We do research not only for publication. Psychologists must do research because we want to explain the phenomenon undergone by people or experienced by people in new forces or in new factors or new environment, right? So we do our observation, we analyze the data that we get, we do explanation, and we predict what will happen later. Okay. Scholars must be ready. So we say that scholars and psychologists, we have to be ready, okay, with adequate knowledge, not only knowledge on how to help, but knowledge on how to understand people as well. Knowledge on how to understand people whom we are dealing with. So we have to have adequate, up-to-date knowledge of psychology. We have to have up-to-date skills. We have to have up-to-date abilities so that we can be fully functioning. We can fully function when we deal with our stakeholders at workplaces or in the society, in school, wherever we operate. Right? So there should be coordinated strategies to equip individuals in the society, individuals at workplaces, right, with enabling competencies. So they need competencies which enable them to deal with demanding and challenging milieus. Right, so they need. We have to have psychologists. We need to have professionals who can enable our members in the society to deal with the demands caused by changes. Right, caused by changes in the society, be it natural changes or technological changes, political changes, whatever changes to happen. Okay, they have enablers or they have the enabling competencies. Like I said just now, we do not change them directly, but we give them enabler. We give them power, or we empower them so that they themselves can deal with the changes that they have to encounter. Right? So we have to help them to quickly recover from difficulty, to judiciously recover from difficulty. Not only a short-term solution, but we can also give them long-term solution. How to give them long-term solution? By giving them the required enablers. What are the enablers? It depends on where they work. It depends on where they operate. Right? So psychologists can also help the society to attain harmonious life and how to minimize disruptive scenario. Right? So every day we deal with changes. I mean, you like it or not, we have to deal with changes, at least changes in time. Right? So how do we deal with these changes? Right? How do we have positive mindset? Okay, so that we can judiciously deal with the changes, and these changes that we deal with will lead us to more productive life or better life. Okay, forces and development of resilient society. So we now talk about resilient society. Regardless of any difficulty, okay, we stand strong. Okay, we can bounce back. Right, so resilient society, society who can deal effectively and judiciously with any changes that they encounter. Right, so psychologists or behavioral scientists. So in psychology, we have to work with other behavioral scientists as well, okay, in order to assist our society. So psychologists and behavioral scientists, they play great roles in assisting the development of resilient society. Right? So it is not only the roles of economists or technologists, okay, to develop a country or to develop a nation. Psychologists, behavioral scientists, sociologists, they also are instrumental in moving our economy to a greater future by giving the enabler to the forces who are the worker or workforce for a country. Knowledge and principles founded in psychology have been applied and are still relevant, are still applicable in order to invent or to substantiate the agenda of ambition, the agenda of innovation, the agenda, any agenda by a nation or by society. Okay, we can come, okay, and offer our help so that, you know, people are motivated, okay, they know how to position themselves in the development of their country. Right? Okay, now what about psychology in Malaysia? So we need a specific domain of knowledge, okay? Knowledge that enable us to understand human characteristics, that enable us to understand the characteristics of forces or the characteristics of workforces who are the enabler to our country. When I say enabler to our country, we mean the enabler to our country development. When we say development, it is not only development, we are talking about change, we are talking about improvement as well, right? So psychologists have many roles to play in enabling or in nurturing the society to change, to improve, or to develop, right? With the knowledge that we learn in psychology, we have many textbooks, we have many journals that we can refer to, right? So we can use those knowledge, okay, to design our intervention plan, the intervention plan to empower our society to change, to improve, and to develop. However, okay, the existing mainstream psychology, we call it general psychology or mainstream bodies of knowledge and principles, might be disconnected to the scenario or phenomena, okay, in the society which we are living in. So we are talking about having indigenous or local principle or local knowledge. Right, so here comes the role of psychology researcher. So psychology researcher is to explain, okay, the behavior, the human characteristics of people residing or staying or working in Malaysia. Right, so that we are not imposing the principles, we're not imposing the theory which have been invented based on empirical study in other society or other culture. Right, yes, we are going to write on psychology principles, but we are going to contextualize, we are going to relevantize the principles, the theory that we found in journal, in books, to the context of Malaysia. Right, so that is one role of psychology and psychology researchers, okay, to contextualize, to integrate the knowledge of psychology with that of the local context. Right, so in applying psychology knowledge in a meaningful manner, psychologists, psychology researchers, or psychology professionals are expected to connect the knowledge, psychology knowledge, with other body of knowledge. Technology, I mean, with ICT, engineering, right, architecture. Okay, so we have to do this integration. And also we connect the psychology knowledge with our context. The culture of people in our society, the culture of Sarawakan people must be brought into the context, must be blended or integrated with principles of psychology or intervention that you want to design. Relate the theory, knowledge, principle with the usage, with the practices. We must not do research only for publication without relating it to the utility, without relating it to the use. Right? The third one is to transfer or to disseminate whatever we found, okay, with our stakeholders, with the community that we deal with. Right? So we transfer, we disseminate, we communicate our findings, our knowledge to various types of community. We are talking about learned community, okay? Academics in university, learning community, school children, right? University students, professionals. Who are the professionals, right? So we have to relate, we have to communicate, we have to inform what we found, okay, with the practitioners. And we can also translate, okay, our findings into guidelines so that our society can benefit. Just now we have heard of psychoeducation, right? So what do we educate? Okay, psychosocial education, okay, psychological knowledge, psychological principles, social knowledge, social principles are translated into simple idea or simple sentences so that it can be understood and benefited by the public community. Right? So that is the use of psychology. Otherwise, it is not useful. It is useless. And the first one, to understand specific approaches or orientation and purposes when we deal with knowledge. So when we deal with a particular set of knowledge, we have to relate it with the use. Okay? We must not only deal with knowledge because we want to publish it, in journals so that we can get promoted and things like that. So we have to always make sure that there are purposes when we want to embark on any new research in that sense. Okay, so let's look at the roles of psychology professionals, counseling psychologists, IO psychologists, organizational change and development specialists, many professionals across various settings that we serve, right? So generate and contextualize, okay, that is the first roles of psychology professionals. They generate and contextualize psychology knowledge. They don't only produce, but reproduce knowledge. They systematize knowledge in a particular context. They organize knowledge and relate it to the use. Right. So this is to make psychological knowledge and principles useful, relevant and useful. Right. Then apply. Okay, this is the social roles of psychology professionals. Apply knowledge so that we can use psychological principles and knowledge to change people, to improve people, to develop people, or to prevent people from having untoward experience in their life. Okay, so the third role is to CID, as I always mentioned just now, change, improve, and develop. Okay, develop or empower them so that they know how to effectively deal with changes that they encounter. Changes that they encounter can be at macro or micro level, small level or big level. Right, and the fourth one is to train, okay, and develop new psychologists or new competent professionals, right? So this is our duty as well, not only to embark on research, not only to offer services, but to also develop new psychologists, new counselors for our futures, right? So that our country would be served by competent, ever-ready psychologists or counselors in that sense, right? So psychologists in practice should be active in evaluating. Okay, this is the roles, basic roles of psychologists. We do this 4 tasks, right? First one is observation, and then we do analysis, and then we explain, and then we do prediction, or we do intervention design, right? So these are basic. All psychologists, okay, must be able to do these 4 tasks, and this will make them scientist practitioner. Okay, we cannot become practitioner without having the researchers component or the researchers competencies, right? So we observe, we analyze data, we do explanation, and then we predict or we design intervention, so that we can become fully functioning psychologists. Fully functioning psychologists are having these 2 main components, okay, having the ability to do research and having the ability to apply what they found in research into practice. Right, next. Okay, so these are the third one, the third part of my talk, the intervention. Coming from industrial organizational psychology, we learn about organizational change and development, okay, how to help organization, how to help society, how to even help individuals to change. How do we empower them to change? How do we empower them to develop? How do we empower them to improve? We cannot directly change them. I think it is impossible. What we could do is to give them skill. How do we intervene? How do we intervene so that they themselves can change, develop, and improve themselves? Okay, the first one is individual level intervention. This is at the personal level, human process intervention. We intervene, okay, we design intervention at the personal level. Okay, when we want to change someone, develop someone, or improve someone, we can do coaching, can do counseling. Okay, that is very personal, one-on-one, or one to small group in that sense. Right, so this can help them see their scenarios, see the forces, see their environment, okay, and we can help them having alternative perspective. We can help them to look for solution, or we can help them to come to decision making, to make decision, right? So this is at the individual level. At the administrative level, right, we can do training, can do development, okay? We can do like group intervention. If we are dealing with people who require help because they are dealing with problems or they themselves are problematic, we can do it at the organization level. I think when I receive email from the organizer, I have seen this word employee assistance division. I think that is a very smart and very timely approach of having a special or dedicated unit to help employees who may be problematic or who are living with problems, right? So we have to assist people not only because they are problematic. Sometimes they are not problematic, they don't have any problem, but they live with problem caused by other people, right? Maybe they have sick parents, sick or ailing children, okay? They have other life issues which might disrupt their work in your organization. So this is another role that psychologists can play that is at the administrative or organization level in that sense. The third one is technological level, structural level. So because of the structural changes in organization, people do not know how to position themselves. Because of the new technology being brought to your organization, people do not know how to behave as well, right? Because of the advancement of social media, you have so many information that you receive, and this will also disrupt your well-being, right? Having to deal with many information coming from various sources, sometimes you are overloaded. When you are overloaded with information, it creates like disequilibrium. Okay, you do not have what we call that good mental health because you are disturbed, distracted, corrupted by unnecessary information sometimes. And the fourth intervention is you work with other agencies, like Dato' was mentioning just now. Not everything that we can do alone, not everything that we have to do alone. We can engage other parties, we can engage other organizations to work with us, or we work with them, okay, to offer help, to offer assistance to people whom we are dealing with. That is what we call strategic intervention. Okay. Now, how do we nurture resilient individuals? So these are some of the ideas that we get from reading. Okay, so we want to develop individuals with the ability to equip themselves with relevant competencies. Relevant competencies here means competencies which are needed at their workplaces or at their society. Now, this is how we operate. Psychologists do not go to one organization and give them intervention, give them tips which we used to give in other organizations, right? So before we can offer any intervention, before we can offer any tips or guide for one organization, we have to do observation first. We have to do needs analysis first. We have to analyze, we have to gather information. We have to do what we call diagnosis, right? So we do diagnosis because we want to give them knowledge, skills, experience that are relevant to their organization so that they are able to change, develop, or improve themselves based on their context. Right? So this is what we say, okay, give them the ability to equip themselves with relevant competencies. Maybe what I need in Selangor is different from what you need in Sarawak. And how do I know what I need and how do I know what you need? So the work of a researcher is important. Okay, needs analysis, okay, identification of analysis is very important before you offer any guide, before you offer any tips to workers in one organization. Okay, the ability to maintain individuation vis-a-vis change. How do you keep to your mission? Right, so maintaining individuation means you being yourself. Right, so if your organization has the mission to do A, B, C, and D, when the ecosystem change, do you have to change to X, Y, Z, or you can maintain the A, B, C still? Right, so this is requiring analysis as well. So you are developing the ability for an organization to maintain itself. What do you want to maintain? Maintain profit, maintain core businesses, maintain ethos, or what is that you want to maintain? Right, so this is another what we call the important factor when we want to become resilient. Ability to identify issues that are taking place in our context. The ability to also scan the environment now and future environment. What will happen 5 years down the road? Right, so now we have a strategic plan. We talk about down road 2030 now. So this is just to look at futures as well. So organizational psychologists, for example, nowadays help organizations not only to deal with the current ecosystem, but to prepare for future scenario. How do we prepare ourselves for the futures? That is also one skill that we can develop, that we can empower when we deal with organization. Ability to judiciously meet new demands. There are now many new demands. Okay, how do we operate? We have to operate based on the demands. Otherwise, we'll be obsolete. Okay, we are not going to be relevant anymore. So how do we empower organization? How do we empower society? How do we empower our family members even to cleverly meet the new demands caused by changes, innovation, invention in the society? Ability to develop balanced outcome when managing demands. Yes, we attend to demands, but there are value that we have to uphold still, right? Where do we position our culture? Okay, even though we are attending to new demand, even though we are dealing with modern lifestyle, where do we position our culture? Right, I think the last one is the readiness, to develop the readiness to face challenges. Okay, are we ready to face challenges? Last year, when we were first encountering pandemic time, so were we ready? Many of us was not ready, but we were assisted, right? So what were the professionals who came to help us in dealing with the challenges last time? And how do we prepare this for the future if challenges or changes were to occur again? So in conclusion, psychologists, when we say psychologists here, we are referring to psychology researcher and psychology professionals. Okay, they are to conduct study in order to explain the causes of challenging environment and challenging lifestyle. So this will continue to take place because changes will continue to take place. Right? With the finding that we found, with the finding that we have to inform policymakers. We have to relate well with policymakers, okay, using the evidences that we have generated through our research. Right? So that intervention can be designed together with the policymakers, right? To design intervention, to change, to improve, and to develop so that we can have harmonious environment, especially societal environment or work environment. Psychologists are also to shape and maintain harmonious workplace, okay, to be supported by resilient workforce. Okay, since I'm talking to government civil service members, I'm talking to workforce, right? So this is very important, okay, that we give attention to. Okay, we want to make sure that the place that we are working in are harmonious. I mean, what you call that? Enjoying harmonious relationship among colleagues. Okay, psychologists are to participate in research and development, okay, which are relevant to the needs of the society. Psychologists are to leverage on innovative, technologically advanced environments. So we have to make good use of technology which are available in our ecosystem. Okay, psychologists are also to provide avenues for other psychologists or societies to collaborate. Like I said just now, we need to have other agencies, other parties, other professionals to collaborate with us, okay, in designing or in empowering our people to change, improve, and develop. And the last one is to assist. We have to always assist in developing the capacity to change. capacity to learn, capacity to adapt, okay, wherever we are, especially when we are dealing with challenging scenarios. So, Brother Mujahideen, okay, that's my point, okay, for my talk this morning. Thank you very much.
Terima kasih diucapkan kepada Profesor Dr. Syukran Abdul Rahman atas ucap pertama sebentar tadi. Okay, sebelum kita balik ke Q&A session, ingin saya simpulkan sedikit perkongsian Profesor berkenaan tema kita pada pagi ini, iaitu The Forces That Shapes Counseling Future. So the Professor has highlighted the emerging scenarios that shape the future of psychology as a field of study and practice, as well as the role of psychologists, researchers, and professionals in empowering individuals and community to relate to the new challenging world, especially to VUCA world, and suggested the type of interventions to develop the field and its professional. Also, the professor also shared the 4 vital points in applying psychology knowledge into a meaningful manner, which are connect, relate, transferred, or disseminate, and lastly, to understand. So, Professor, kita akan balik ke sesi Q&A session.
Yeah.
Profesor, untuk soalan yang pertama, in Malaysia, is there a common psychology scope or there are different psychology scope based on different needs or environment?
Yeah, what? Is there any?
Is there any common psychology scope in Malaysia, or there are different psychology scope based on different needs? Based on different needs or the environment.
Yeah, so in Malaysia, there are psychology profession. Okay, I think the psychology profession in Malaysia are the same like the need in other societies, except that we are not that yet established. We have started. We have job scheme for psychologists, right? We have pegawai psychology now. We have pegawai psychology clinical. We have many posts available in government offices, in Kementerian Kesihatan, right? So these are the available profession, okay, for psychology graduates in Malaysia, and also for counseling graduates. Maybe we are not as advanced as in other country, but we are moving towards that, right? So the Persatuan Psychology Malaysia is now working on tabling or getting the Parliament to table the Psychology Act, and this Psychology Act will outline the many scopes which are needed by the society, and what are the criteria, or what are the requirement to become psychologists or also chartered psychologists in the country. Yeah, so it is not yet established, but we are progressing towards that.
Professor,
yeah.
So for the next question from Encik Yusuf Kamil, yeah, culture and shared values are very important in the organization. How can we use applied psychology to give impact and help to inculcate a good culture and our shared value in the organization?
Okay. All right. So organizational culture is something that we have been focusing on, that we have been giving attention to. In addition to national culture, we are also talking about specific organizational culture. So every organization has its organizational culture, in addition to the national culture. I think we have learned about this cultural dimension across settings, across country, the power distance, the collectivistic, individualistic. These are the national-based culture. But we are also talking about good organizational culture, developmental culture, managerial culture, advocacy culture, political culture, many culture, okay, that are necessitated or required by a particular workplace. Now, how are we going to develop or nurture this culture? Right? Whose role is this to enculturate this culture? Right. So in organization, we always conduct like training. We always conduct what we call the orientation. We always conduct this induction course, onboarding program, or motivational talk from time to time, like leader, subordinates, dialogue or town hall, or what we call now a kopitiam session, something like that. Right. So this is to inculturate organizational culture, to give the idea of the organization, or from the organization to people, okay, to subordinates, to workforce. Right. There are many interventions that we can adopt to embark in order to enculturate, or in order to develop organizational culture. So that's one thing, right? So to have good culture will require climate as well, right? How do we provide good climate so that people will behave in the culture that we expect? Like I said just now, we need to study, okay, what are the existing culture and how to change from the existing culture to the desired culture using that 4 intervention. Right, so that 4 intervention that I mentioned just now is also applicable when you want to develop, when you want to nurture, specific organizational culture at your workplace. Right, caring culture, or developmental culture, managerial culture. There are so many cultures that you can prefer to have in your organization. Sometimes that culture will naturally happen. So it's either you develop it or you allow it to naturally happen. Right, so if you have organizational psychologists in your organization, or if you engage organizational development specialists to help your organization, you can design some approaches to develop culture in your organization. And that is my brief answer to that.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor. So we have a question in the Q&A box here from Tang Mingmin. Professor Dr. Shukran, we understand that when someone experiences a negative or traumatic event in childhood, their brain records the specific sensation, sight, sound, smell, and etc. How to prevent this kind of bad experiences to affect personal mental health development?
I see. All right. So this require help, right? So you need professionals to help. So I think assessment is important. Okay, I believe the presence of professionals important can bring that person to see professionals like counselor or clinical psychologist or psychiatrist, right? For the person to be further assessed, and from the assessment they know, what intervention or what program, okay, to be designed for the person to improve or to be assisted in that sense. Yeah. So you can approach providers like government service provider, Mentari, for example, or private provider, or if he or she in school, okay, you can also get the counselor to help.
Thank you very much, Professor. So the next question from Puan Jamaya Haji Subed. Not all interventions are accepted well. So how do we try to connect in the first place without having any difficulties if a person chooses total ignorance to avoid certain issues?
Can you repeat the question?
Not all interventions are accepted well. So how do we try to connect in the first place without having any difficulties if a person chooses total ignorance to avoid certain issues, Professor?
Yeah. So perhaps the intervention, like the intervention that I quoted just now, intervention which require the application of behavioral sciences knowledge and principles. And these behavioral sciences principles is not only limited to psychology principles or psychology knowledge, right? So perhaps other knowledge like communication, even ICT, for example, can be used. Yeah, how do we approach an individual not through direct contact? Right? Is there any other mechanism that we can approach, or that we can have access to the person whom we want to help, or that we want to have access with, right? So one intervention doesn't work, but maybe combination of many intervention can be considered as well when you are dealing with someone who receives help. Right, so sometimes, yes, we deal with a member in organization which we believe require help, but the person resists help, right? So is there any other approach other than psychological approach, right? So one thing in intervention under human resource is reinforcement. And when talk about reinforcement, punishment can come as well, right? Okay, so in organization, there are some measure that you can activate in order to get hold to somebody, get hold to someone. So maybe if all intervention that you have designed and implemented do not work, maybe you can resort to some affirmative action as well.
Thank you very much, Professor. So we have a question from the previous participant. Professor, there is also a study about negative experiences in brain records could leading to antisocial personality disorder and cause
experiencing
about negative experiences in brain record could leading to antisocial personality disorder and causing criminal behavior on how to prevent that from happening.
Brain what is now? Brain distort?
Records. It records into the brain.
This is cognitive issue, isn't it? Yeah. This is learning disability?
Negative experiences in brain recordings.
I see. So this is about learning. This is about learning difficulty, I think. Is it about learning learning difficulty?
It's about negative experiences that could leading into antisocial personality disorder.
I see. Okay, so this is about personal development, right? So yes, like I answered just now. Okay, so if parents has difficulty to deal with this type of person, okay, they can refer the person to professionals as well. So there are professionals who can come and attend to the person by doing proper assessment and design certain intervention programs to help the person. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Professor. Next question from Encik Jeffrey Jalong. As counseling student, degree, masters, and PhD, I am bound to become a counselor. However, is it right for me to address myself and profession as I am a psychologist?
Oh, okay. Yeah, so there is no act as yet in the country, but to become a chartered psychologist, you have to have proper training in the field of psychology. Right? At least you have bachelor's degree in psychology, right? So I think if you have been trained in counseling, okay, you are more than qualified to become counselor. Right, I think when you register with Perkama, for example, you will be licensed as a practicing counselor. Right, so you'll be given, your license with the credential and whatnot. Right, so if you want to be a psychologist, right, you can also. I think you have to go to do masters or PhD in psychology, and you specialize in perhaps counseling psychology. So by specializing in counseling psychology, perhaps you can become counseling psychologist. Right, so that is what I think.
Okay. Thank you very much, Professor. So I believe this is the final question from Puan Sharifah Shazia Wan Akil. Mental health is a very sensitive issue. Is there any guarantee that the information shared by any person to psychologists, therapists, or counselors with regard to their mental health will not be disclosed to any other person? Or is there any institution or body in Malaysia where a person may go to complain about malpractice or disclosure of confidential information by the psychologists, therapists, and the counselors?
Yeah. I hope Professor Zuraida Jamil is here to answer, because she is a clinical psychologist. You'll be having a session, or maybe you have had a session with her. You can put this question to her again. But yes, confidentiality is important. Not only in the matter of mental health, but anything that you share with psychologists, okay, psychologists must keep all the information confidential, PNC, private and confidential. unless there are certain contexts. So there are code of ethic, code amalan, ahli psychology that we are developing. And I think now for clinical psychologists, they are being governed under Allied Health Act, right? And I believe that Allied Health Act require them to keep all information shared by client as confidential information. Yes, and you can at least complain with MSCP, Malaysian Society for Clinical Psychology, should you encounter any breach of confidentiality, okay, when you deal with any clinical psychologist in that sense.
Thank you very much, Professor. And that would be the last question for our session. Maka berakhirnya lah sesi Q&A kita untuk sesi ucaptama yang kedua ini. Sekali lagi, Profesor, majlis ingin mengucapkan ribuan terima kasih kepada Profesor Dr. Syukran Abdul Rahman di atas perkongsian beliau yang menarik pada pagi ini. So once again, thank you very much, Profesor. Dan para hadirin yang dihormati, kita akan berehat sebentar dan sesi ceramah pertama akan bermula pada jam 10.45 pagi nanti. So stay tuned semua dan join us for the next session. Thank you very much.
Hi.
Selamat pagi, salam sejahtera, salam satu Malaysia, salam Sarawakku sayang, dan selamat kembali ke webinar Konferen Psikologi dan Kaunseling Perkhidmatan Awam Negeri Sarawak ke-7 bagi tahun 2021. Terima kasih diucapkan kepada semua peserta kerana masih lagi setia untuk meluangkan masa bersama kami pada pagi ini. Saya, Cynthia Janaki, anak perempuan Jogopal, adalah moderator anda pada sesi ceramah pertama ini yang bertajuk The Importance of Wellbeing in Transforming Future Workforce yang akan disampaikan oleh Dr. Victor Goh Wen Yew, Senior Lecturer Department of Psychology, Faculty of Behavioral Sciences, Help University, Malaysia. He is also affiliated with Mental Health and Wellbeing, CMHW, and Malaysian Mental Health Association. Tanpa membuang masa lagi, saya menjemput Dr. Victor untuk meneruskan dengan ceramah kita pada pagi ini. Dipersilakan, Doktor.
Hi, thank you, Cynthia. Before I start, let me just share my screen with all of you. Okay, can you all see my screen?
Yes, can.
Okay, so very good morning. Before I start, I just want to say a quick word of thank you to the Sarawak State Department for organizing such a meaningful initiative to ensure the well-being of the mental health of the state workers in Sarawak. And thank you to all of you, my fellow panelists, as well as the audience, for tuning in and actually giving your time and sharing your time with me. And I hope that whatever I have to say will be of use to all of us here today. So, the topic for my talk today is the importance of well-being in transforming the future workforce. And I'll be looking at a few things, but before I start, let me just give a quick rundown of how things are going to be like here. We've just had the pleasure of listening to two fantastic speakers earlier in the morning. And I would like for this talk to be a little bit different. So I will be sharing, but there will be some segments in the talk where I will open to the audience to give their feedback, to give their own ideas, so that you don't always have to listen to me, right? Because sometimes I do find my own voice can be quite boring, so I don't want you to just sit down there and listen to me the entire half an hour and get bored yourself, all right? So there will be some times that I will open to the audience, and I would really encourage all of you to share your thoughts in the chat box itself, and then maybe Cynthia or myself can look through the questions and your sharings and answer them even during the talk itself, okay? So, when we talk about the importance of well-being in transforming the future workplace, I'm going to start off with two main problems, right? So I'm sure we've all heard this before in our schooling days. Berakit-rakit ke hulu, berenang-renang ke tepian, bersakit-sakit dahulu, bersenang-senang kemudian, right? And I'm told by one of my Sarawakian friends that there's also a Sarawakian statement that's similar to this. I'm not Sarawakian, so I apologize in advance if I get this wrong. But I think it's mun sik kerja kuat, sik dah hasil, right? And I think that means something similar as well, right? Where we suffer first, and if you work hard, you go through the pain, then you get your results later on, right? Now, this is one thing that's very, very common, especially in Malaysia, right? We are all taught this in school. This is actually a pepatah bahasa Melayu, right? That was taught to us in school, right? Bersakit-sakit dahulu, bersenang-senang kemudian, right? And sometimes we apply this in our workplace as well. Right, so because we were raised in this environment, we think that, for example, if you go to work, I will suffer through the pain first, and then later on, dapat gaji, get my salary, okay, then I can relax, right? Then I can be happy again. So we go through Monday to Friday, kerja kuat, right? Walaupun tak suka, you're not happy at work, it's okay, we just work, dapat gaji, then we enjoy ourselves, okay? But is this model actually beneficial to Malaysian workers, right? Is it true that we have to go through the pain first and then enjoy ourselves? Now, pepatah ini, berakit ke hulu, berenang ke tepian, is not wrong. It is simply saying that we need to work hard in order to enjoy our lives, right? But if you apply it in the wrong way, for example, in our workforce, then it can lead to quite some bad consequences, as we will see in this talk. So the question here I want to ask ourselves is to work to suffer, right? Is it suffering for us to actually be in the workplace? Now, why is this question important? Well, because mental health is increasingly becoming quite a concern in the workplace, particularly now during COVID-19, where lines between work and home are actually very, very blurred, right? So we used to go to office, we work in office, we come home, and that's the end of our work. But now most of us, if we have the chance, we work from home, right? So you wake up, you're in office. You go to sleep, you're also in office, right? There's no clear line between what's work and what's home anymore, right? And that actually has some negative effects on our mental health, as our previous two speakers have already mentioned before, right? And in Malaysia, recent statistics also show very, very similar trends about mental health becoming a concern. So for example, an increasing number of executives and workers report suffering from anxiety, from depression, and from mental stress, right? And surveys done in both public and private sectors in Malaysia also show an increase in mental health problems due to stress in the workplace, right? Now, if you go back to the pepatah that I started off with, right? If we think about the pepatah, we will think, tak ada masalah lah, right? There's no problem. You work, you susah dahulu, you senang kemudian, not a problem, right? But if we look beyond that, we realize this may not be an acceptable way to actually work, right? Both for the organization as well as for the workers. And that is what I'll be covering today, right? Why is this model of suffering in the workplace actually not very, very useful, and why mental well-being in the workplace is actually so much more important than we think it actually is. Okay, so why are Malaysians suffering? Right, we know that they're suffering in the workplace. You know, mental health is an issue. Why? Well, these are the few top factors. Okay, number one, workload. Right, too much work, terlalu banyak kerja. Go home pun you stress. Right, so we go home, you're still stressed. That's one of the biggest factors, right? Workload. Second is unpleasant tasks. So kadang-kala bos suruh buat sesuatu, you tak suka, but you perlu buat juga. Right? Boss tells you to do something, you don't like it, you still have to do it. Unpleasant tasks. And lastly is the conflicting home and work demands. Now, this one is quite interesting, right? Because prior to this, now bear in mind, this survey was done in 2017, right, before COVID-19, and there was already conflicting work and home demands in terms of the top three factors. Now, with COVID-19, do you think it's gotten better or gotten worse, right? So you're at home, you're trying to give a talk, I'm trying to give a talk here, and then my one-year-old son is right beside me now, calling for my attention, right? So it gets even more difficult, right? There's work and home demands, they are clashing even more, right? And surveys have shown that depression is predicted to be a major health problem in the Malaysian workplace by 2020, right? So that was last year. Now here's the question, right? Has COVID-19 paused this, or has COVID-19 made it worse? Do we think by 2020 last year, or even this year, is depression an even bigger issue due to COVID-19, right? So you're stuck at home, again, stuck at home, you're worried about your family, you're worried about your loved ones, you're worried about your work, right, your work colleagues, and you can't do anything about it, right? Some people have lost their jobs, some people have gone through pay cuts. All of these things can contribute even more to a lack of well-being in the workplace. So is work to actually suffer? Well, the argument here is actually no, not really, right? According to Jack Canfield, actually an American author, he says, you know, to achieve your dreams, work is required, but suffering is optional, right? So we don't necessarily have to go through hardships. It's not something that we should just accept that work is going to be difficult. It's okay. That's not the mentality that we should actually be adopting, right? Suffering is optional, right? We don't have to be unhealthy, mentally unhealthy in our workplace. Now, how do we do this? Before we talk about how we do this, let's look first at what it costs us when we suffer in the workplace for mental well-being, right? So the ability to work is significantly predicted by the perceived well-being levels of the workers themselves. What does that mean? In simple English, it means how people work in the workplace, in a workplace, right, that they are in right now, is predicted by how well they think they are doing mentally, physically, as a whole, right? So the perceived well-being levels will actually predict their ability to work, right? And poor workplace well-being will generally lead to lower levels of performance. So if their mental well-being is not healthy, research indicates that their performance levels will normally drop. So you can see here, both sides of the story here, right? The worker side as well as the organizational side. From the organizational side, it makes sense to ensure that their workers are actually mentally healthy. This is the importance of mental well-being in the workforce, right? Because if your workers are not mentally healthy, their performance levels typically drop. right? So how important is well-being for performance? Well, we found, IO psychology, we found that only 25% of job success is predicted by IQ or ability, right? So how well someone does because of their ability or their brains or their smarts is only 25%, right? The other 75% of job success is predicted by constructs of well-being, such as optimism levels, social support, as well as the ability to see stress as a challenge instead of a threat, right? We also found, other research has also found that, happiness has raised sales. If you make your workers happy, it has raised sales by an average of 37%. This in sales workers, productivity in office workers by 31%, and task accuracy among health workers, for example, doctors, nurses, by 19%. Now, this is one thing you want to get right? Imagine if your doctors are not accurate, right? You go in there, you're supposed to have an operation on your kidney, they take out your liver, right? That's a big problem here already, right? So happiness actually raises their accuracy by 19%, right? What does this tell us? It tells us that when you hire someone for their ability, just their ability, their talent, their ability, but you totally ignore their mental well-being in the workplace, you only get a maximum of 25% of their total possible output. So you hire one person, but you only get 1/4 of them. Why? Because the other 75% is due to their mental well-being, is linked to their mental well-being. If you ignore their well-being, you don't care if they're suffering in the workplace or not, you only get a maximum of 25% of their entire output. So as an organization, it costs you quite a lot if you ignore your mental well-being of your staff, because if their well-being is ignored, they are only going to perform at 1/4 of their total possible output, right? So, okay, so we come to the first part, like I said earlier, right? I want to ask the audience here to just try and reply in the chat box. What does well-being look like for you? And what gets in the way of your well-being in the workplace? So really quickly, we spent about 2 or 3 minutes here, right? Please do write down your responses. What does well-being look like for you, right? If you want to be happy in the workplace, jika you mau nak gembira bila kerja, what does it look like for you? What should be done, right? Is it talking to your friends? Is it being able to go out? Anything that you feel that actually responds, that actually helps you with your well-being, right? And what gets in the way? Apakah cabaran, right, that you face in the workplace that stops you from enjoying well-being in your workplace, right? So please feel free to answer in the chat box itself. Kurang rasa keyakinan diri. Okay. Teamwork, work and life balance. Thank you very much, Jamaya. Abang Rashid, thank you. All right, thank you for your response. Okay. Okay, so what gets in the way of well-being? Kurang rasa keyakinan diri. Okay. Well-being when individuals feel energetic to work and productive, being able to manage our emotions. Happiness, good positive conversations, stress-free. Work and employer. So I'm assuming, Azrul, work and employer, this is the what gets in the way. Apakah cabaran you're facing, right? Not toxic working environment, teamwork, kebahagiaan. Okay, now, thank you very much for all of your responses. Now, the interesting thing about your responses, toxic colleague, Jasmine, right? Thank you very much for your responses. Now, here's the interesting thing. As we go along, you will see that a lot of your answers are actually very, very similar to what psychological research has found in terms of workplace well-being, what it looks like for people, and what gets in the way of their workplace well-being. So keep your answers in mind, and then we will see how many of your answers are actually accurate. All right? So in psychological research, how do we define well-being? Well, there are 2 main ways that we look at well-being in the workplace, right? So the first one is hedonic well-being. Now, hedonic well-being, hedonic is a Greek term, right? Hedonism, hedonic. It's well-being or happiness that's related to an individual's personal happiness. So, for example, job satisfaction, good colleagues, right? Like some of the respondents said earlier, happiness and enjoying the work, having good colleagues, a non-toxic working environment, having good teamwork, good positive conversations, right? These are all hedonic. So these are things that make you feel happy in the workplace that's linked to yourself, right? That is linked to your own personal feelings, right? Your own personal emotions, hedonic well-being. Now, the second way that we define well-being is eudaimonic. Again, another Greek term. Eudaimonic simply means as a whole, right? An individual as a whole, the whole person. So well-being related to a general condition of living well or thriving, right? So it's very different from hedonic. Hedonic is just your individual personal happiness. Eudaimonic is more as a whole person, are you doing well, right? So one of the things, the responses that I had earlier that somebody was very kind to share was the first answer I remember, Abang Rashid, right? He said, kurang rasa keyakinan diri, right? A lack of self-confidence, lack of belief in themselves, right? That is what gets in the way of his well-being in the workplace. And we can see it here as well. In eudaimonic well-being, if you feel the sense of self-confidence, self-ability in the workplace, that is eudaimonic well-being. Being able to feel that you're personally growing, you're personally developing, you are getting better at your work, right? That is eudaimonic well-being. Now, both kinds of well-being is important, whether it's hedonic, whether it's eudaimonic, whether you feel happy because of your colleagues, or you feel happy because your work got meaning, your work has meaning, right? Both types of happiness, of well-being is significantly contributing to work performance and work productivity. So it is not as though hedonic is less important, eudaimonic more important. No, both are actually equally important in trying to get people to work better, right? So, hold on, yeah. Now, individuals who report higher job satisfaction, so hedonic well-being, right, are also more engaged with their workplace, right? And according to the seminal job characteristics model, the JCM, by Hackman and Oldham, personal growth and purpose at work leads to improved work outcomes across multiple industries, both private and public. Now, the JCM by Hackman and Oldham was created first in 1986 and has been tested across the past few decades in multiple different environments, and it always finds the same thing, right? When you let people grow and you let them feel a purpose in their work, it normally leads to improved work outcomes because they feel better about their work. Their well-being is actually improved in their workplace. Now, so how do we achieve well-being, right? So we know from research that well-being is important, right? How do we achieve it? So there are two main ways that we can look at how we achieve well-being in the workplace. The first is individual changes, and the second is organizational changes. So both parties have a role to play here in achieving well-being in the workplace, right? So let's look first at individual changes. What can we do as an individual to achieve well-being in the workplace? First and foremost, we look at the first research by Lubomirsky, kindness in the workplace, right? Workers who practice kindness towards their colleagues in the office reported significant improvement in their workplace mental well-being. Now, again, let's look back at some of the answers that we had earlier, right, from the respondents to see if it's similar, right? So we get Jamaya, who said, teamwork is something that helps her or him feel more well-being in the workplace. So some of them said, good. Jeffrey says good positive conversations, right? Yolingzi also says teamwork, right? Titi Rika says, not a non-toxic working environment, right? So you can see a lot of your responses here line up with a lot of the research done in IO, in industrial organizational psychology, right? Kindness in the workplace, being non-toxic to your colleagues, right? Being kind, being helpful to your colleagues, that can actually help to improve mental well-being in the workplace. Now, how was this done? How did they find out? In this particular research, they tested the effects of kindness simply by asking people, okay, to practice an act of kindness every single day. So for example, they will go into work every day and their task for the day itself is to consciously be kind to their colleagues, to 3 colleagues. So every day they choose 3 different colleagues. Doesn't matter it's your boss, your someone under you, your subordinate, right? Just choose 3 colleagues and be kind to them. How do you be kind to them? In this study, they send an email, for example. So every morning they will choose 3 colleagues. They will hand out the email. The email itself will say, thank you for being my colleague, thank you for all that you've done for me, etc. I really appreciate what you've done. I think your work ability is very good, I think, etc. So they were very, very kind in their emails, right? And they hantar email je. It's nothing big. It's not, tak perlu lah beli hadiah ke, buy a present, tak perlu, right? Just hantar email je. So simple, right? But what they found was that workers who did that in their workplace, after a week or so, they significantly reported greater mental well-being. Now, this actually helps both parties, right? Orang yang terima email tu, those who got the email, and orang yang hantar email to those who sent the email, both parties reported greater mental well-being. Why? Because when you receive kindness, you feel happy. But when you give kindness, you also feel happy. You also feel better about yourself as well. So this kind of simple exercise in the workplace has been found to create an effect, a positive effect on mental well-being in the workplace that spreads quite quickly, right? Why? Because if you're kind to one person, you feel better, the other person feels better, that person is kind to someone else, that person feels better, another person feels better. It spreads very quickly across the entire organization. And in the end, mental well-being of the entire organization becomes better as a whole. Right? The second individual change we can do is to adopt a growth mindset. Right? So what kind of mindset is a growth mindset? A growth mindset is basically a mindset where you believe that growth and change is possible. Right? You believe that you can improve. You percaya yang ability yang you sendiri ada, you boleh improve. Right? So you're not fixed. Just because you do something bad once, you do something wrong once, doesn't mean that you will fail in the future as well, right? So having a growth mindset, believing that you can change, you can improve, you can adapt, actually makes individuals happier, and it helps them to face stresses a lot better. Now, it is quite common for people to enter a workplace and feel that, whatever I can do is fixed dah. Right? So apa yang saya boleh buat dah fix, right? Keupayaan saya memang dah fix. Tak boleh improve lagi. So bila bos bagi kerja baru, we stress. We ingat, okay, boss has a new task for us. We are stressed. We feel like, okay, saya tak pastilah saya boleh buat tak. Right? Because I feel like keupayaan saya sekarang memang tak cukup. Right? I don't feel like I'm good enough for the new job. But if we have a growth mindset, we believe that memang keupayaan saya tak cukup. Memang I don't have the mindset, the skill sets, but I can improve. I can learn. Saya boleh belajar. Right? That actually helps us reduce the stress we feel in our workplace bila boss bagi kerja baru. Right? When our boss gives us something new, we believe, hey, I may not know this, but I can improve. Right? I can learn how to do this. I can learn how to use this new program. I can learn how to do this new task. I can learn how to manage this new department. That actually helps us face stress a lot better. So adopting a growth mindset. Okay. And lastly, practicing conscious gratitude. Right? So this is also quite an interesting study where they told workers to take 21 days, so 3 minggu, right? 3 weeks straight, right? 21 days, 3 weeks. They took workers in their office and they told them to practice gratitude in their workplace, right? So every single day, all they need to do, their task is simple. Every single day, they just need to send one email, right? Again, very, very simple, nothing big, just an email. One email thanking a colleague in their office for doing something for them. Thanking their colleague for either doing something or either for being there or either for being a friend. So practicing conscious gratitude. Write an email to thank their colleague. Right? Sometimes some other studies have also done journals. So they told workers to go into office, keep a journal about things that they are thankful for. So macam like today I go to work, macam hari ni saya pergi kerja, oh tak ada jam. I'm thankful for the lack of jam when I'm going to office. Right? Or they go to work and say, okay, today in the workplace, my office was very clean. I'm thankful for the cleanliness of my office. Right? So they just told people to practice conscious gratitude. Just feel thankful. Just practice gratitude. Right? And they found that after 21 days of doing this, workers who did this reported significantly higher levels of workplace well-being and were less susceptible to stress as well as PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. Why? Why does this work? Because in psychology, we know, right, that if you take 21 days of doing something over and over and over again for 21 days, right, you rewire your brain. You change the way your brain processes the world, processes information that comes in, right? So when you practice conscious gratitude for 21 days straight, you train your brain to look for the positives in the workplace first. Every single day you go to work, you are getting used to the idea that the first thing you look at is what can I be thankful for? Not, oh, kerja ni susah lah, or what am I stressed about? Instead of looking at the negatives, you start beginning to look at the positives first when you enter your workplace, right? This actually helps people report much better mental well-being in their workplace because they are so used to looking at things that actually helps them feel better. Okay, so those are individual changes that can be done in the workplace, the top 3. Now, there's obviously a lot more from research, but due to time, I will only share these top 3 that I believe we can all practice in our workplace. Okay, but that's not all, right? So we have individual changes, but that's not all. There's also corporate organizational changes that we will cover later as well. Okay, but before we go there, let's have a quick feedback. All right, so putting words into practice. So let's try and practice this. Okay, so what are you grateful for in your workplace, and what sorts of kind acts can you engage in and increase in your workplace? So again, we have a feedback session from the audience. What are you grateful for? Right? What are you thankful for in your current workplace right now? And what can you do in your workplace to increase kindness? Right? What can you do to be kind? So let's look at the responses, right? So take some time, think about it, and share with each other. So maybe you can actually also encourage each other to look at what they can be thankful for in their workplace. Jamaya, what she's thankful, or he or she's thankful for helping each other, right? Or you can also help each other more in the workplace, right? And that will help to improve your mental well-being. Okay, thank you, Jamaya. Anyone else? Right, okay, being more considerate. Okay, Lenny, right, grateful that Lenny has an understanding boss, right? Adrian, well done. Adrian, knowledge sharing, right? Knowledge sharing is a kind act, right? Teaching people how to actually do things, right? Sharing your knowledge, right? Deborah, ikhlas, being sincere. Abang Rashid, being tolerant, right? You can be more tolerant in your workplace. Cynthia is thankful for her good IT facilities and having good, helpful friends, right? Jeffrey, right, is thankful for an opportunity to grow. Douglas, thankful that we're helping each other as a team. Azrul is thankful for positive support, colleague tolerance, teamwork, right? So again, there are a lot of things, right? So thank you very much for sharing, right? There are a lot of things that we can be thankful for in our workplace. And there are also a lot of things that we can do to increase the thankfulness in the workplace by being more kind, right? By being supportive of each other, by having a good team to work with, right? So Raymond, right, he's thankful for laughter, right? Yeah, Pujian, right, being able to praise your colleagues, right? That's something that can help to make people feel better, okay? And Ling Ling is happy for a workplace that feels like a family to her, right? So thank you very, very much for sharing, right? These are all actually very, very important things that we can all be thankful for. And thank you also for sharing what you can do to increase your kindness in the workplace, okay? Now, that was about the individuals. We look now at the organization. So what can an organization do to improve mental well-being in the workplace, right? So the first and foremost we look at from research is feedback, right? How important is feedback? Feedback, in a sense, the definition of feedback is allowing your workers to actually receive feedback and provide feedback to you as well as an organization. How can companies do this? We recommend that you set up an effective system that allows workers to receive feedback on their work and their progress. So if you are a manager of a team, of a department, whether it's in a public sector like the State Department or a private sector, if you are a manager, set up an effective system that allows your workers to receive feedback on their work and their progress, right? Because sometimes workers, kadang-kala, you kerja kuat, but you don't get any feedback from your boss. So you tak tahu you kerja buat tu betul ke salah. right? You're not sure whether you're progressing, you're doing something right, or you're doing something wrong, right? The feedback allows you to understand what you are doing in your workplace. Am I doing the right thing? Am I on the right path towards success? Am I doing something that's helpful, or am I doing something that's wrong, right? That feedback allows people to actually gauge themselves and measure themselves, right? And feedback also allows workers, you can also allow workers to provide you as a manager with feedback. So as a manager, you should be open to feedback from your workers regarding work conditions, regarding work concerns, right? So as someone who is managing a department, you should allow your workers to feedback to you about their work conditions. So kadang-kadang some workers, now here's the thing, right? We must understand that human beings, we are malleable, we change over time, right? So for example, if I joined a company first and I was single, I was not married, I was single, I was working very hard, right? And I got used to the environment already. After 1 year, I got married. After another year, I have 3 children, right? My wife got triplets, right? Now, obviously, things have changed for me, right? If I suddenly have 3 children in 1 year, things have changed a lot for me. Will that affect my work condition? Will that affect my ability to work? Yes, it will, right? So as managers, we must understand that our subordinates can actually change. As they go through life, they can change. Right? So allowing them to feedback on their concerns, on their work conditions, instead of assuming, oh, semua sama, right? It's the same. You can do this yesterday, you can do it tomorrow as well. That's not true. Things can change. Allowing them to feedback to you will ensure that their mental well-being is taken care of, right? Secondly, we look at task identity and task significance. Now, what does it simply mean? It simply means that workers who are given the opportunity to see the results of their work tended to be happier. So bila you kerja, once you are done with your work, you are able to see the result. Okay, inilah hasil kerja saya. All that I have done, this is the result of my work. All the hard work I put in, inilah hasilnya. Right? That makes people feel better. Imagine if you kerja kuat, you work very hard, but all of your work is taken away, and they don't tell you whether or not your work is okay. Work you okay tak boleh tahu, right? They don't let you know how important your work is. They don't let you see the finished product of your work, right? How will you feel about your work? You won't feel very happy in your workplace because you feel, saya kerja, I work so hard, I'm not even sure what's happening. I don't even know what I'm actually doing, right? So letting them see the results of their work, what have they done so far, and especially how important is their work to the company, to the public that they are serving, etc. That makes them feel a lot happier. Research has indicated that if you want to make people feel happy with their work, let them see the results of their work. How does it help people, right? So for example, and it can be done in any job. If you're a teacher, how do you see the results in your children? Even if you're an admin staff, how do you see the results helping the people that you are serving, right? So that's how you let your workers see the results of their work, right? Now, what else can the company do, right? Thirdly, autonomy, right? And this one we've covered earlier. This one, some of the questions earlier actually did say this, right? They said, being able to do my own things, right? Being able to actually make my own decisions, right? Autonomy is actually very, very important in mental well-being in the workplace, right? A study on 18 different countries, including Malaysia, found that giving workers autonomy, right? Giving them the chance to control their own work schedules, to organize their own daily work, was found to be a significant predictor of workplace mental well-being, right? So how can the company allow more autonomy? How can the company allow you more freedom in your work? There are 3 ways they can do this. Number 1, work scheduling. Now, this can be a bit difficult, right? Ini susah sikit. Why? Because in Malaysia, normally kerja work hours is 9 to 5, right? So it's a bit difficult to say, oh, hari ini saya nak kerja pukul 6. Hari esok saya nak kerja pukul 5. We can't do that. So scheduling is a bit difficult, right? But the method of work, now that we can do, right? Giving workers the choice to choose how they want to do something. So you bagi mereka project, they have a project to do. The project, they can decide how they want to achieve that project instead of following there must be a way that they must follow, right? And lastly, giving workers decision-making autonomy, giving them the chance to make their own decisions in the workplace, right? In simple terms, what does this mean? It means avoid micromanaging, right? If you are a manager, if you're a company and your company culture is to control every single thing. You need to avoid that. Why? Because if you micromanage, if you control every single thing that your worker can or cannot do, that leads to increased stress in the workplace, according to research, and that leads to decreased mental well-being in the workplace as well. Now, in an Asian context, I understand it can be a bit difficult to do this. Why? Because in an Asian context, we are very, very big on hierarchy. So boss yang paling besar, then number 2, number 3, number 4, and everybody has to follow instructions, right? But that model of work, particularly in the knowledge economy, in the service sector, right, can be quite detrimental to the mental well-being of workers in the workforce itself, right? And lastly, we look at organizational changes that can be done based on the Stevenson and Farmer report. Now, before I carry on, let me just explain what is the Stevenson and Farmer report. The Stevenson and Farmer's review was commissioned by the UK government to look at the mental health well-being, okay, of UK workers across the country and suggest some tips, some things, changes that they can actually do to improve the mental well-being across the UK, and we can take some of their guidelines from that same report. Right? So according to the Stevenson and Farmer report, organizations can do these few things. Number 1, provide employees with good working conditions and a healthy work-life balance. Right? So like our respondents said earlier, right, work-life balance is actually very important for them to feel mental well-being, right? The humanizing factors, right? These are all things that that our own audience have shared, right? So good working conditions and a healthy work-life balance. Secondly, increase transparency and accountability through internal and external reporting on mental health issues and initiatives. So as a company itself or as a government itself, right, we need to be able to be more transparent and more accountable in what we are doing to address mental health issues in the workplace, and what are we doing to what initiatives we are doing to actually improve mental health. For example, the Sarawak State Department is organizing this particular talk for mental health, right? So that is what needs to be done. Thirdly, organizations should encourage open conversations about mental health and establish an effective feedback and disclosure system for employees to report and receive help. So for example, kalau if you're in a workplace, kalau you got tempat kerja and you're being bullied, right? You're being bullied by your colleagues or your superiors, there should be a system, a disclosure system for employees to report about the state of their current mental health, the current mental well-being, right? And for companies to actually respond to them as well, encouraging open conversations. So the taboo of mental health should be removed. The stigma of mental health should be removed. Like our speaker said earlier, right? It's okay to not be okay, and that's fine. And our companies need to actually embrace that culture of openness about mental health. And lastly, to produce, implement, and communicate a mental health at work plan that promotes well-being among all employees. So being able to have a structured plan, right? So bukannya companies just say, okay, you pergi buat yoga, you pergi buat relaxation, buat meditation. That doesn't help, right? There has to be a structured mental health at work plan that they can produce that promotes mental well-being among all employees. So the plan isn't just activity. Bukan saja you buat yoga ke, you buat meditation, you pergi doa ke. That's not all. There has to be a structured plan in terms of feedback, in terms of measurements, in terms of execution, in terms of company initiatives, not just giving them ad hoc lessons in meditation and yoga. That helps, but it will be much better if there's a structured plan in place that all employees can actually rely on. Right? So these are a few of the recommended organizational changes from industrial organizational psychology research. Okay, and can this be done in my workplace? Okay, so the question here again for the audience to look at: what do you think about this? What do you think about prioritizing feedback, task significance, identity, and autonomy in your workplace? And what impact do you think the Stevenson Farmer review suggestions might have on your well-being in the workplace? Right. So again, I would encourage the audience to share their thoughts. Do you think feedback, task significance, autonomy can be done in your workplace now? And what do you think about the Stevenson and Farmer's report that I'm showing here on the slide? What do you think can be done? Can this be done in your current workplace? Please do share.
Peserta boleh drop komen ya di ruangan chat.
Okay, while we are waiting for the comments, which we can address later in the Q&A. Thank you, Adrian, giving clear tasks and role for each staff. Okay, as we can address this later in the Q&A, I'll just move on for sake of time. Okay, so again, in summary, right, towards the healthier future workforce, how do we make our workforce in the future healthier? Right, we need to understand first and foremost that mental well-being is an essential component of the current and the future workforce. Right, with Malaysia as a country transitioning towards a service-oriented and knowledge economy rather than the previous physical-oriented labor economy, the mental health of workers becomes even more important, right? So prior to this, when all of our economy was mostly just producing, right? BJ Timah, rubber, we're just producing stuff. All that requires is you kerja kuat. You have physical strength, dah boleh, right? But now, as we move towards a service economy, the knowledge economy, right? The mental health of workers becomes even more important, right? And by committing adequate resources and adequate willpower to mental health, policymakers, organizations, and even individuals such as you and I can transform their current and their future workplaces to ones that will benefit everybody, right? Even organizations, individuals, it will be a benefit to all if we have a healthier workforce in the current situation as well as in the future. Okay, so thank you very much. We will go back now to the chat and we will look at what some of the participants have said. Okay, so Adrian, he said earlier, giving a clear task and role for each staff. Gina says feeling free of fear, right? Jemaya says it can be done with both parties between superior and colleagues, and sharing experiences. Kamarudin, sharing experiences in every level of the work task. And understanding that the employee and the employer plays equally important roles. So thank you very much for your responses. And like I said earlier, in summary, this is why it's important. So I'll hand the time right now to Cynthia. And thank you very much for your time and your attention.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Victor. Okay, so that is an interesting topic to discuss about. Okay, so well-being at workplace undeniably is very important. Okay, so basically, I would like to summarize a bit on the talk. So there are two ways to achieve well-being in the workplace, which is at the individual changes and also at organizational changes. So individual changes, you need to practice kindness in workplace, adapt a growth mindset, and also practice conscious gratitude. And then for organizational changes, you need to practice some feedback, give feedback to the staff, task identity and significance, autonomy, changes in policy and environment. All right, so right now we're going to move on to the Q&A session. Okay, there are a few questions posed by the participants. Okay, the first question from Yvonne. Hi, can doctor give an example on how to implement feedback actions? And how frequent do I need to provide the feedback?
Thank you very much for the question, Yvonne. I think that's a very important question, because if you're going to implement feedback in the workplace, it's important to know how we do that as well as how frequent. Now, there are two main kinds of feedback we can look at, right? So we can look at in terms of task-related feedback, so feedback when you do a task, as well as general feedback from the staff itself. Now, let's look at the first one first, task feedback. Okay, so how frequent do we need to do the feedback when it's about tasks? Well, very, very simply put, if it's a task-related feedback, every single time the task is completed, there has to be a feedback, right? So if you give your staff a project to do or something that they are doing, or even a simple thing like a task Like, for example, handling a spreadsheet, right? Handling a PowerPoint or a spreadsheet. Once the task is completed, as the person who is assigning the task, you have to provide that feedback. Now, feedback can be up to you, right? You can provide feedback in a way that you feel comfortable with. Okay? But here's the good thing about feedback. In psychological research, we find that feedback doesn't need to be something big. It doesn't need to be something very effortful, like, you beli hadiah, buy a gift or something. No, it doesn't have to be that case. In some of the studies that we've done in terms of feedback, sometimes simply acknowledging somebody with a well done, 2 words, well done, that seems to already be the feedback that's more than enough to actually get workers to feel more motivated in what they're actually doing, right? Or even a simple thank you, well done. A better way of doing feedback, I would suggest, is to choose something particular about the task that you notice. So for example, if somebody sent you a spreadsheet and it says, and you just say, okay, well done, right? That's good enough. But if you can choose something particular about that spreadsheet that you feel the person did very well, and say, well done on doing this, I particularly like that you did this. That particular thing that you found out in that spreadsheet, that actually helps your subordinates to feel that you've taken time to read their work, you've taken time to analyze it, you've taken time to actually find things that are genuinely good about it. That can actually help. So that's task-related feedback. We look now at general feedback, right? So how do we actually have general feedback actions? So sometimes, some companies, they will do what they call a town hall. Right. So every month, every 2 months or so, they have a town hall meeting where workers can come, they sit down, and workers are allowed the freedom to share their thoughts, share their ideas, share their concerns, to feed back to the company, to their managers about what they feel. Right. So for example, the past 2 months, I myself have gone through some changes. I feel the company hasn't helped me to adapt to those changes yet in my new role, etc. So those kind of town hall meetings are very important in the sense where they allow your workers to feed back to you about what they are going through, right? And it also allows you to give them feedback as well about what the company is going through, what the department is going through, and what you expect from them as well. So those kind of regular town hall meetings will help in terms of the feedback initiatives that companies can do. Okay, how frequent also depends. I can't give you a clear answer in terms of, oh, you must do it once every 2 months, because every company is different. The resources are different. The work style is different. Okay, so how frequent, that needs to be decided by the management themselves as to what works best for the company. Okay, but thank you very much, Yvonne, for that question.
Okay, Doctor, we move on to the next question from Lilia. Okay, seeking advice from Dr. Goh. Unconducive working environment. Every day come to work in fear. Should I fight or flight?
Thank you, Lydia. And I'm really sorry to hear about your current predicament in the workplace. Should you fight or flight? I think the question here, it's quite an important question, but I would like to ask a different question entirely. Why the fear, right? Why is it that you are fearful in your workplace? Is it a person thing? Is it a task-related thing? Right? Is it linked to your task or is it linked to the person? If it's linked to the task, you don't know how to do your job, for example, the task is the problem. Maybe speak to your supervisor about it and talk about how they can help to assist you in that task. If it's linked to a person, again, if it's a colleague, speak to a supervisor about it. If it's a supervisor themselves, sometimes that can happen. The supervisor themselves is the one that's causing fear. Is there a solution that you can achieve with your supervisor to discuss your own concerns, your own feelings for why you are feeling that fear and what you can do about it? Now, I understand that sometimes there is no simple answer. Sometimes we do face situations in the workplace where there's no clear way to get our supervisors to understand the fear that they are facing, right? And in response to your question, should you fight or should you flight, right? It depends very, very much on your physical resilience, right? On your mental resilience, if you can take the stress, right? Or you find a way to cope with that, then that's fine. But my word of caution for you, Lydia, is that you must understand that being in a situation every single day that in a sense leads to what I said earlier, PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, right? It is a psychological disorder where the fear itself becomes quite overwhelming to a point where it really severely affects your mental health. So maybe the question you need to ask yourself, if the problem cannot be solved, the question you need to ask yourself is there a different job that I can be doing? Is there a different company, organization that I can join? Because at the end of the day, your mental health is actually the most important, right? Because if your mental health is not healthy, if you're mentally not healthy, you can't find a job in the future as well. So the salary itself is important, but ultimately your ability to function normally, that's even more important, I would say. I would argue, than the money or the salary that you're getting. Okay.
All right, Mr. Okay, we'll move on to the next question from Azrul. Work-family conflict is said to arise from simultaneous pressures from work and family domains that are incompatible in some respect. Because of this incompatibility, participation in one role is made more difficult by virtue of participation in the other role. In what way the organization can help to maintain their employee work-life balance?
Thank you, Azrul. That's a very, very interesting question. All right. Now, the reason why I'm smiling is because I used to work with somebody who simply said this. His answer to this was very simple. You nak work-life balance? Senang je. Work equals life. Balance that. Right? Now, obviously, that doesn't work, right? Obviously, work cannot just be life, right? That doesn't work, right? And what you're saying is actually very true, right? Work-family conflict arises from the simultaneous pressure from work and family that are incompatible. Right. So when you work, you can't play your role as a father, for example, in my case. When I'm as a father, I can't play my role as a lecturer in my case, for example. Right. So that role clashes actually creates work-family conflict. What can organizations do to help maintain their employee work-life balance? I think first and foremost, like I covered earlier, autonomy is very important. Right. So giving workers the choice to choose how they work, decision-making, scheduling, now that's very, very important. Now, I am very lucky in a sense where I work in an organization that allows quite a lot of autonomy in my workplace. So, for example, I may have a project that I need to be done, but I don't have to do it within 9 to 5. I can choose to put my son to sleep, then I do my work in the middle of the night. Right? So that's my autonomy that allows me to play both my roles as a father as well as a researcher, as a senior lecturer in my organization. So autonomy is one thing that companies can actually do. I think something else that companies should do, companies can do, is to actually have regular reviews with their employees. So like I said earlier, we cannot just treat an employee as similar. So every year, 100 employees, not all of them are the same, right? You can't treat them all like they are the same, they're the same kind, the same level, same responsibility, same duties, semua sama. That's not true, right? We know every single person has their own challenges, has their own responsibilities, has their own different life condition. So companies should actually deal with each individual as an individual, as a unique individual, right? Having regular reviews with the person. Sit down with your staff, ask them, how are they doing? How is their work coming along? How is their family coming along? How is there any current conflict between work and family? And what can we do about your workload to make sure that that doesn't clash anymore, right? Here's the thing. So some companies will think, if I do that, what if my worker tak mau kerja lagi? Right? My worker said, I want to stay at home. Right? But most workers won't do that. If they understand that the company cares for them, they care about their company. Right? It's always a two-way thing. If I feel my company cares for me, I'm going to care about my company as well. Right? And if you give your workers the time to fit their work together with their life, they become more productive. So I would suggest the companies to be more brave in this response. Don't be afraid to give their workers more time to fit their family in, because if their family doesn't have a problem anymore, then their work doesn't have a problem anymore, right? So it helps your company as well. When you respect them, you give them the time, you improve your own company's productivity as well, because they work harder for you rather than them being stressed all the time and unable to work for you, right? So those are the two things that I would recommend.
Okay, thank you, Dr. All right, I think we have some space and some time for another question from Jeffrey Jalong. No doubt, autonomy is one of the vital key factors to improve workplace well-being for staff and worker. However, workplace that's subject to so many written rules and policy and the do and don't, how is autonomy best practice can be done?
Thank you, Jeffrey. as an industrial psychologist, if I were to go into a company and they ask me for that, the first thing I will look at is their rules and policies guidebook. And the first thing I will say, if they have too many rules and policies, first thing I will say is, you need to get rid of some of them, right? That's a very, very simple thing. You need to buang lah. Some of the peraturan for the buang, right? Why do I say that? Because sometimes we create rules based on certain conditions. So something happened last time, we create a rule to make sure it doesn't happen again. But things have changed since last time. Those rules no longer apply anymore, or those rules are outdated. So companies should always review their rules and their policies in terms of how and whether or not those rules still make sense, whether or not those policies still make sense, whether or not they're up to date, and whether or not they are actually helping the company. Because sometimes we create rules and we do it with good intentions, but we don't see the big picture and see how those rules may affect the company as a whole down the line. Right? So sometimes it's important that we take a break, we pause, we look back at the rules and policies we have in place, and we examine them and ask ourselves, do these rules still apply? Are these rules actually helping the company, or are these rules actually harming the company now already? Right? Rules can be changed, policies can be changed, right? And I would suggest that companies do look at these rules. But if, for example, Jeffrey, if you are in a workplace and your company has a lot of rules, and you can't say anything, you can't change it because you're not a manager, you're not the CEO, you can't do anything about it. What can you do? Choose your own level of, what I would say is you can choose your own level of autonomy. So yes, there are rules that you can follow, but you try and either number one, either negotiate your work with your superior, or what you can do, what you can't do, or if there's no negotiation, find ways in your own job right now that you have control over. Find things that you have control over, right? And make sure that you optimize those things to help you work better, right? So sometimes, for example, we might follow cultural perceptions. It's not a rule, but it's a cultural thing, right? Sometimes we do that unconsciously. Look at what you are doing in your workplace every single day. Is there anything that you are following culturally that you don't actually have to follow? Can you change that to make your work more optimal? Okay.
Okay, Doctor. Can I make a room for one question? Final question?
Sure, of course.
All right. Okay. From Tang Min Min. Okay, Dr. Victor. Despite there are some mechanisms established for getting feedback from staff, example, Majlis Bersama Jabatan and Council Club Committee, it is observed coordination for completing tasks is still lacking. Therefore, assignment completion was unsatisfactorily attended. What kind of motivation could be given to stimulate overall performance? And then apart from that, staff tendency to delay on completing assignment is a big problem in my organization. Any suggestion to improve this situation?
Thank you, Min Min. I think what you've mentioned, you have two main questions there, and they are quite complex questions. So there's no straightforward answer. I can't give you an answer. Min Min, just do this and definitely you'll get the result. It's not that straightforward. Like the previous speaker actually mentioned, industrial psychologists, if you try and analyze problems in a company, we first must collect data. So I don't have any data on your company, so I will not give you any particular strategies that you can use because I don't know your company, right? But that being said, there are some things that I can speak about in terms of your current situation right now. So what kind of motivation could be given to stimulate overall performance? I would assume you're saying performance for assignment completion. I will assume that, right? In terms of motivation, sometimes we need to ask ourselves, instead of what kind of motivation can be given, we need to ask ourselves, what is it that currently demotivates them? So sometimes we look at things that, what can we give to people to make them work harder? But sometimes the question is the other way around. What can we take away from people to make them work harder? What does that mean? Now, it sounds very bad, but let me explain, right? Sometimes people aren't motivated to do something because they don't see the importance of doing that thing, right? So if they don't feel that what they are doing is important, if they don't feel that what they are doing is actually useful, they will not feel motivated, right? So sometimes instead of giving them more stuff, more things to motivate them, you need to clarify some things to them, take away some things from them, right? That will make them more motivated. So for example, in this particular assignment, right, assignment completion, it was unsatisfactory. Is it possible that they are unmotivated, they are demotivated to complete the assignment simply because they don't understand the importance of the assignment, or simply because the assignment itself clashes with their other work roles? Can you remove a work role from them to actually encourage their assignment completion? Or can you help to elucidate, to help them understand the importance of the assignment that you're giving to them first? Right? So again, like I said, sometimes motivation comes from giving people things. Sometimes motivations come from removing things that people don't like to do in the first place. Okay, and apart from that, staff tendency to delay on completing the assignment is a big problem in my organization. Again, the question here is the assignment, now this is not a judgment on your company. I'm not saying your assignments are not good. Please don't get me wrong here. What I'm saying is you need to ask yourself the question, why is it that staff tend to delay on completing their assignments? Do they understand the importance of their assignments? Do they understand the importance of submitting it on time? Right? And sometimes this can also be a cultural thing. So for example, if I join a company and the cultural expectation of the company is, it's okay, you boleh lewat pun tak apa, right? That cultural expectation, the cultural belief can spread across the entire organization and affect multiple different work outcomes. So sometimes you need to review again, what is the company culture like? What is the leadership modeling? So for example, if the leadership themselves model a behavior where it's okay, they are never on time, they don't reply on time, they don't do things on time as well, it is very common for those below them to feel that, okay, timing is not that important. I can deliver an assignment late, it's okay. So sometimes we need to also review the company culture with regards to timeliness, with regards to submissions, and with regards to deadlines. Okay, so I would suggest these are very, very straightforward, general things that you can do. Look at the company culture itself. And secondly, review the assignment itself, review the workers. Are they understanding of the importance of the assignment? Are they understanding of the importance of submitting it on time? That is what we can actually look at. Obviously, there are much more targeted strategies that we can actually do if we know the data for your company, but unfortunately, we are not in this current talk. So I hope that still helps you, Ming Min. Thank you for your question.
Okay, thank you, Doctor. All right, there's actually time for another question.
Sure.
May I pose a question directly to you, Dr.
Yeah, sure.
All right. Okay. Some employers, they kind of like disregard well-being of their employees and they focus only on productivity. So, for example, the sentence that I heard before is like, the organization is not a charity center. So, what are the things that can be done to actually tackle this kind of mindset from the employers?
Thank you, Cynthia. I think I've heard similar things as well, right? In my course of my work, sometimes I've heard employers say, "Why should I care?" Right? It's not a charity center. I bayar you, you buat kerja lah. I pay you your money, you do your work, right? Why should I care about how you're feeling? Now, if you view it as if organizations view it as why must I help you, then obviously they are not going to be very motivated to talk about mental well-being, because for them it's like, I bayar you do it, I give you salary, you work, that's all. It's a trade, right? I give you money, you do the work. It's a trade-off. But if they view it as, if my workers are healthy, they work harder, then it's a very, very different story already, right? So if the mindset changes, it's very different. If you can change how people think. So for example, I've spoken to some managers before who used to think that, okay, I pay them money and they do their work, like, why should I care about their mental well-being? But they don't realize that if I pay you 5,000, but your mental well-being is not good, you are only going to give me 2,000 ringgit worth of work. But if I pay you 5,000 and I make sure your mental well-being is good, you might give me 7,000 worth of work. So again, companies have an interest, right? It is not just you doing charity, it is for the company's own benefit as well. If you as a company can make and can ensure that your employees' mental well-being is taken care of, your company will be more productive. Your company will earn more. Your company will lose less. There is a selfish interest for companies to ensure that their employees' mental well-being is taken care of. So even if you talk about charity, you don't want to do charity, that's fine. You should still make sure your employees' mental well-being is good, because that makes your company stronger. not just about charity. So even if you don't care, even if you tak ikhlas, I don't even care about them at all, it still makes sense that I make sure they are healthy because I will earn more as a company. So companies need to understand this. Right? Like I said earlier, 25% of the workers' total output is based on their ability. 75% is based on factors of mental well-being. So if companies really want to do well, they have to make sure that they tap that 75%, not just the 25%. Your salary only gets you 25%. The other 75%, you must make sure their mental well-being is healthy.
All right. Thank you very much, Doctor, for the feedback. All right. I think this will be the end of the talk this morning. Thank you very much, Dr. Victor, for the interesting input. And yeah, you have answered a lot of Q&A for quite some time, and we really appreciate that.
Yeah.
And I think the audience also really learned a lot from this session. Okay, thank you very much, Doctor. All right. Dengan ini berakhirlah sesi ceramah kita pada pagi ini. Alright. Okey, kepada semua peserta webinar, saya ada sedikit pengumuman. Okey, mohon kerjasama untuk semua peserta untuk mendaftar kehadiran pada sesi untuk pagi ini dan juga petang ini. Okey. So sesi kehadiran petang dan pagi akan diambil kira untuk mendapatkan CPD point untuk hari ini dan juga untuk esok hari. Okey. Kepada semua peserta webinar akan ada 5 bengkel yang akan dijalankan serentak ya pada petang ini. Okey, bermula pada pukul 2.30 petang. Perincian bengkel yang akan diadakan pada petang ini adalah seperti tertera pada skrin. Okey. Untuk maklumat semua peserta, terdapat 2 kaedah untuk menyertai bengkel pada petang ini, iaitu kaedah pertama, peserta boleh menyemak inbox email masing-masing dan klik pada pautan Zoom yang telah diberikan dalam email tersebut bagi menyertai bengkel yang telah dipilih semasa pendaftaran konferensi ini, ataupun kaedah kedua, tuan-puan juga boleh memasukkan Zoom ID dan pasport mana-mana bengkel seperti yang tertera pada skrin. Okey, mohon kerjasama para peserta untuk menyertai bengkel sekurang-kurangnya 10 minit sebelum jam 2.30 petang bagi memudahkan pengisian rekod kehadiran bengkel. Okey, dengan ini berakhirlah sesi webinar kita pada pagi ini. Kita akan berjumpa lagi pada 2.30 petang nanti. Selamat berehat dan selamat menjamu selera. Terima kasih.
Recording stopped.